actually, he's kind of the coordinator for the whole county, but he directly is
How
the
you doing,
commander of
Morgan?
the ones there.
Been a while.
He said that they're thinking in the legislature, because they're having a hard time hiring resource officers,
Good.
they're thinking about changing the retirement requirements so you can apply directly into that job and keep the same salary. So if he could do that, well, he could retire, take his full retirement, and get the full salary he's getting now doing stuff in the schools.
See, they'd have a lot of guys stay on.
Oh, they would. And so tell him that may be coming. You ought to wait at least until next legislative session and see what happens. Because that would be a sweet deal.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because that's why a lot of them
Malcolm, how are you?
leave,
Nice to
was
meet you.
because
too. What's your name?
they
Bryce.
couldn't come, like if they came back.
So
they
two
came
Bryces
back
you got to
at a
deal
lower
with.
wage.
Or they can't come back for a year.
Yeah.
There's a separation plan,
Yeah,
we'll
there's
call
that
it.
separation time, and then when they come back, they're at the lower wage, you can start. He says, there's no sense in
No, you're okay.
He says,
We're
"Why
just
do you want to
chatting.
come back?"
Yeah, you go somewhere else and make a lot more money. Yeah.
Okay, should we go ahead and get
On
started?
the other hand, if you what you already know well, it makes
I do
sense.
too.
Yeah.
Is it recording, Aaron, already? Yeah. I mean, Aaron. Morgan, we were just talking about Aaron. Okay, so we're
Just what
meeting
these
August 15th.
Actually mean.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
In our language.
Yeah, all
We
right.
just have a few things, so we'll go through this and then just a few announcements. One thing,
And that, you're not gonna be
we are
asked
going
to
to
pass
start having our
All you
meetings
need to do
live.
is
We got that to work last time with the
Planning
planning
Commission for study.
commission, and so from now on, our meetings are going to be live. And another thing along with that I wanted to ask you if you would ever be interested. We had talked a little bit about maybe getting like a tablet or something that we could use, that planning commission could use too, that everything could be on rather than printing them off. But I don't know how you would feel about that, if you would sooner have that, if you just still want to have paper copies. We're kind of redoing things because they did a cybersecurity last year and said we were just, well, it wasn't so great, the findings. So there's some things we need to upgrade with cybersecurity. And so I thought when we were doing that, if you'd be interested. But if you're not, we don't have to. But just a thought. And then we, everybody could just have a tablet and everything.
For a lot of that stuff, it makes a lot of sense. If it's something you're reviewing and need to make comments on, you almost need a hard copy.
Yeah,
But for minutes and things like that,
yeah. Well, maybe think about it, and then, we don't have to do that right now, so. Okay, so we'll just go through, because there's a few things. So discussion on agenda items. Does anyone have any?
I got one of my things that I have a list of things here I want to talk about is number 6, the crossing guard. So I know school's
yes.
starting, so
Yes.
how are we going to address the kids this
Yep.
fall?
Yep. So, I don't know if you've gone by there lately, but they have started working on that trail.
East side.
The east side, yes. And they are going to, West Haven is the one that's doing the roto mill, and then we're grading it. And we actually, and I'll just make introductions now. This is Malcolm Jenkins. He is our new city planner. So city council, I don't know if you want to introduce yourselves to Malcolm.
I got introduced.
So, okay. And we hired a new road supervisor. So we haven't had one for about 3 years, I believe, and he's over there working already. So I think that'll be great. And his name is Cody Stevens. Anyway, so they're working. So as far as that, this is something I wanted to ask you about, but I don't have prices. We're going to have a crossing guard. We talked about that last time. So we're going to have a crossing guard so they can cross from the west side to the east side and then down to the school. We're going to have a crossing guard down at the corner at 33 and 51. And I can't remember, Bryce, if it was you that brought this up, but something about if we could get lights, maybe it was even you, Dale, someone. So I don't know what the price would be. Yes.
The stop signs,
Yeah.
whatchamacallit.
So we could check into that.
Flashing lights.
Well, we almost have to have something they could push so
Just
when
the
they went
pushing
to,
crosswalk thing.
like on 5900
Like
that
the
we
trail
have.
system. uses.
Yeah, like the trail system uses.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was exactly what I said, but I know I said something similar.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that's something we should look into and see how much. So a crossing guard is going to be $6,500. I don't know if the school would let us just have the light and not a crossing guard, because up on 5600 they have that crossing, but they also have a crossing guard. So I could check if you want to. I could check and see if we want to. I don't know. I don't know if they'd still make us have a crossing guard.
Probably should.
So, and the other one is the crossing guard. So, we talked about this a little bit too. So on 5500 South in front of Freedom Elementary. So, the north side of 5500 South is no longer in Hooper School, but are in Hooper's boundaries. They now go to Country View. With that though, they have 100 students that have signed a boundary exception that, and not every single one of those are in like Higley Meadows, but there's probably 80 of them that are. And so I had sent an email to Lane Findlay. He's the superintendent over safety, and then Dave Hales is the assistant superintendent, about if we a crossing guard. And he said, you know, it's interesting because the principal just already called in and said, we think you still need to have a have a crossing guard on 5500. The thing is, they will tell those kids, walk up to Holiday, go to the corner, walk across and down. Are they, though?
No, they're going straight down.
They're going to go straight down and they'll be...
And then try to cross.
So that one would be through Roy, and I'm assuming 6500, but if you're, okay, we could just check and make sure with Roy. I don't know what else to do. I just still have a crossing guard there.
No, I think you still need one there.
So those boundary exceptions eventually go away, or they always
Well,
going to be there?
I don't know if they will. So the boundary exception is for the dual language immersion program. And so they can start that in first grade. And so you could have kids that started last year in first grade and will probably want to continue to do the
At that
Spanish
school.
at Freedom and clear through 6.
Instead of going over to Country View.
But you can have kids at any time that want to do the dual language immersion that can apply for a boundary exception. So I don't know. I don't
So
know.
it's probably not going to go away.
I don't know that that'll ever go away.
Well, no, but a lot of them that do go up there are parents just take them because there's people down here that go up to Freedom because of the Spanish immersion. So, but there's several in that subdivision across the street, just east there, that got their boundary changed, but they still want to go to Freedom because of the Spanish classes.
So is it the time to tell the school district they need to pitch in as well? I don't know if now's the time.
They do not.
I know they don't.
They don't.
They will not. I wish they would. I even called the Ogden School District because I think Reed was either recommended, see what Ogden does.
Yeah.
But no, the school districts, they said, do not. And I checked with someone else that had been
Because
anyway.
they're just in charge of busing.
What Ogden does is pay, I think, the full cost of the resource officers, whereas
Yes.
Weaver splits it with the county.
Yeah. So,
Well,
That's a fairly young subdivision as well.
it is.
It has a lot of young people, and they're still building a few houses here and there, and the younger people are even moving in there. So there's going to be families for quite some time, and
Yeah.
I know that dual immersion is real popular.
Probably the only time we wouldn't is maybe if they do away with the program. There were some districts this year that voted to not still continue to supplement the dual language, but it wasn't any in Weaver County. I think it was one that was down Salt Lake somewhere that they said they're not going to anymore.
well, with their variance, the parents should be told they have to drive their kids to the school. And you can come to our school on the condition of that you provide a way for them to be there and not walk because we can't.
Yeah.
And that should
Fair
have been
enough.
part of the
Yeah, that
variance
makes
for
sense.
their safety.
I think that's a good idea, but will that happen?
No.
No.
And as
because-
soon as something happens,
Mhm,
we're to blame.
mhm.
So we probably, as long as there's kids, I agree. If they choose to get a variance, they should be responsible. But unfortunately, I don't think
They won't do it because
That'll
it's so
happen,
easy for them
so-
just to walk that half mile.
it's probably something we're gonna have to do. I don't know. What do you
Well, we
guys
could try it this year. Start trying it. Maybe we could even look again, and I could check with them and see if those crossing lights will, maybe that'll satisfy I don't know if it does the safety recommendations.
that's what
I-
They had that for a while. Their Roy Elementary, but then they also added the crossing guard to it. So, but now they've moved theirs all around. But
Now we know where it'll be
Yeah.
this year, huh? Okay, well, I'll check into that. I'll check in with the lights. Okay, we'll just go down then. Okay, senior lunch. They have not been coming. So they came that one, the last time they came was
it was 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And we were going to tell them that we would do it the first Thursday of every month, and they have not been back for us to tell them that. So I talked to Janet Stoddard, and she said, and I told her, we were planning on doing it. She said, oh, okay. She said, we just go to Roy now, except for like Margene Ballif. There's some that don't go to Roy, but most of them go to Roy. And the one in September, this office was just going to do it anyway because that's when we have that conference. So maybe we'll just play it by ear and maybe do it on that one, or maybe not, or maybe we're done.
We don't need to worry about the first of the month.
No.
Did they know that we were planning on that for them?
Well, I
They
don't
haven't
have,
been back.
haven't been
Right.
back.
Oh,
And I don't know, we don't know who to contact to spread the word
Yeah.
to everyone.
So I had marked down on the 5th I was to pick up lunch and bring it, so I don't worry
In
about
September?
that. September
No,
5th.
because we'll be, unless if you're not, are you going to the Utah
I
League
am.
Conference? Yeah.
I am.
So we are just going to have the office do it, so let's not worry about it, and then we'll see. Which goes along with another thing down here is the donated organ. So Bruce had mentioned to me before that their family really liked the organ, that they were really nice and donated, which that was. But if we aren't going to have seniors here, I don't know if there's any reason to have the organ, but I just wanted to run that past you and
So does
see.
he want it back? Did you?
Well, he said the family would have really liked it.
Oh.
Well, the
So
agreement
who
was
is
we were,
this?
we were going to put a little plaque on it, that it was donated. The what?
Oh, she just asked who it was. And I said
was.
Bruce Taylor. It was Bruce
Yeah,
Taylor.
so it was it was Kathy Taylor's mother
Yeah.
that donated the organ to the city, and we were going to put a little plaque on there that she had donated it. So,
Yeah.
But does he want it back?
Well, so he said,
well,
he said to me, we would have really liked the organ, but we said we would donate it to the city. So,
but why did he bring that up? I mean,
well,
why?
he was talking about, it was back when we were talking about whether to surplus the house or not, and he said there was furniture in the house that they would have liked, but that when they sold the house, that the furniture came with it. And then he said, and we would have really liked the organ, but then, we donated it to the city, and which was nice, and we can get a plaque. But then when the seniors aren't here anymore, and they don't play it anyway. They don't play the piano. But anyway, I just thought maybe we could talk about it and see if they want it. And if we're not having the seniors, what do we do with it? I don't.
I don't know if he wants
Get
it
a scary
back.
guy.
What?
Get a scary guy.
Well, I don't know. Did he
Yeah, if
actually
it's
come
his
and say
organ,
he wanted
wants
it
it
back?
back, give it
Did we-
back. Absolutely.
Did we suggest that we weren't going to use it? I mean, that's
No.
because Kathy's the one that called
Yeah,
me
at
and
the
said,
time.
I would like to donate my mother's organ to the city.
They just didn't want it to be sold out to whoever. They kind of
Yeah.
wanted
Right.
it around still.
No, it was had to do with the furniture, because he said, because he mentioned, and I think we brought it up at a meeting, I don't know if you remember or not, because they said about like the refrigerator, the washer and dryer. He mentioned there were some things that they would have liked in the house. That was in the same conversation. And then he said, and then the organ, we would have taken the organ, but we said we would donate it, and so. But,
Well, if it was part of the so-called furniture in the house that was sold with it, it's the city's anyway, right?
Yeah.
So we'll sell it back to him.
yeah.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, well,
See what you
For
can
the
get.
price of the house, sell it back.
Yeah.
I think if he wants it back,
Yeah.
that's my opinion, give it back to him.
Yeah.
If we're not going to really use it or
well,
do anything
my
with
only
it.
concern, did you talk to Kathy? Did you talk?
No, I talked to this Bruce that I talked
Okay.
to. But I think
I just
Kathy
Yeah,
don't
was
maybe
there.
find out, if Kathy gave it, then ask her probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Well,
we're
it's
asked
her
Kathy.
mom's her.
And I don't know, it just kind of depends. If they thought we were going to use it, I mean, she gave it to the city in memory of her mother, that we would put a plaque on it. But if it was suggested to them,
Yeah,
hey, we'll never
no.
use it.
No,
You
it
see, it's
wasn't
just-
suggested to him, so.
Well, at some point, the city might use
Kathy's a
it.
good
Yeah.
friend
You
of
know,
mine.
somebody might.
Just
I-
ask, you just
yeah.
talk, Debbie, you just.
Yeah,
ask
I'll
her
just
that.
talk to
And just
Kathy.
tell her the seniors aren't coming anymore and
Yeah,
see if
I'll
they
just
would-
ask her
Yeah.
what she wants.
Maybe the
Just
tomato
ask
jam
her if
people
she
would
Yep.
like it.
wants it.
Yeah, the tomato jam.
Maybe
people.
they would like it.
Will you play?
I don't
Play
know.
an organ.
Oh, yeah, because it
concert.
plays
Maybe
itself.
Halloween Haunt and play a scary.
yes.
Yeah, get the scary guy to play the house on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that organ's perfect for that.
okay, so Debbie, we'll have you do that then. On the
Okay.
crossing guard, okay.
Set up a booth with the organ.
Okay, so Joni Flatt called me and asked if Hooper City and West Haven would be interested in providing a dinner for Westfield's football team. She said because it is their inaugural year, they're trying to get different people to donate a dinner. There would be 140 people because it's for the sophomore, JV, and varsity teams. They usually do it 2 nights before varsity, so it's usually on a Wednesday. They've done it at the Country Park, which is West Haven's on 3300 South. And so she wanted, and I said I would bring it to City Council and see.
Is it just a one-time thing, or?
It would be just a one-time. Well, one time this year, I think. So I don't. So I go back and forth a little bit because I think that's fun, and I think that's. And then I think, okay, but if we do that for them, then should we do it for basketball? Do we do it for volleyball?
Yeah, you wonder what you're getting yourself into.
I know, but it would be nice to do, and I have a meeting with West Haven on Monday, so I can ask them, but I thought I would ask you
So
first.
is it just a meal on game week?
She said it would be 2 nights before the varsity, so it's usually on Wednesday.
Okay.
So is it just one time?
Just one time this year, I think. But another thing
So
too
it's not a
is,
fundraiser?
no,
Okay.
and
Just
we
provide
have,
dinner for the players.
we have Hooper kids at Fremont, Roy High, Syracuse. And so then, but I really am fine whatever you think, because I think things like that are really fun, and I think it's a nice thing to do, but
I just wouldn't want to set a precedence. Then what? I mean, how do you?
Well, and what do they expect the dinner to be?
Yeah.
I mean, is that, can we do hot dogs, or does that have to be this big old?
Yeah,
Ham and
I've never known
potatoes
of a
or-
city doing this before. I mean, this would be a first, unless.
This city,
Yeah, they
other
never-
cities may do it.
yeah, she
Yeah.
said Roy High does it for the football team at Roy.
Roy City does?
Roy City does, yes, sorry,
Every
Roy
game,
City
or-
does. No, just like this.
Just for like their opening?
Well, no, they just find different people to donate it. So they have a dinner for the football team before every game. So they're just out, they're like a parents group, and they're just trying to find meals. Yes. And so she asked, but no, it really could be anything, whatever we want to do. But I just.
That's really interesting. I'm just saying it's interesting because being involved with the musical and different things up at Roy High, is their own parents bring meals for the week of rehearsal and play. Their own parents provide it, each
Yeah.
of them just put on a day and provide the meal. It's their own parents. But on football, we got to have sponsors.
Yeah. Well, and
It's interesting.
I was kind of going through, and I thought, so even if you figured $10 a person, which that's maybe excessive, and maybe not, would be $1,400. And if we each did it, if we shared with West Haven, like I said, I don't know if West Haven is going to either because I haven't talked to them yet. But so that would be $700 if that was a $10 meal. But then again, well, I don't know, because like I say, I really like all of that. And she said, it's their inaugural year. We have this brand new high school. But
And that's the reason we have to feed them, because they have no more money.
well, they do have a nice field house.
They do have a nice field house. but They
Yes,
don't have any money to open.
they have a great field house. Best
But
in the
anyway,
state.
they would like to know, and then she said they could give me dates of when we could do it. And then, like I say,
Well, if you're sharing it, I think that's more feasible than,
Yeah.
and I think we shouldn't have to spend more on them than we would actually use.
well, that's true.
Yeah, I think it would depend on the cost to me. I mean, because we have our own city to take care of. And it sounds like a great deal and everything. It's just, do we want to give another group money that we have for us? Or, I guess I'm being a Scrooge here, but,
No.
you know,
It does sound fun.
Well,
it does sound
Is it in
fun.
the budget?
Yeah.
Would they expect it, year after year, like you said, for the basketball and then for the
Yeah.
volleyball or whatever
Because
it
it is inaugural,
For
everything.
everything.
for them.
Well, and one thing I asked too, because I've had to do this, so I always ask, I said, well, okay, but are we supposed to, so when you do a meal, you're supposed to get someone has to have a food handler's permit, you're supposed to get the temporary food permit from the health department. She said, oh no, it doesn't matter, you can just bring whatever you want. Well, I don't think we're.
You can't legally do that.
Thank you. We're not supposed to do that.
Right.
Because I've just always had to do that. If we're having any event at all, we're really supposed to report it. And she said, no,
What is
just bring brownies.
What does it cost to get a street taco truck out there?
See, this is what you get.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
It'd be a lot easier.
I've seen those
Oh,
weddings.
yeah.
I suspect
Lot
that's
cheaper.
doable.
Chichos,
Yeah.
the
with
Chichos
Chichos.
empanadas, and they can have them.
And you give the guy a head, maybe there's two of them, and I think that'd be a lot less expensive. And to say, hey, can you give me a deal? Because those guys are going to know they're going to sell, I don't know, 60 dinner. I don't know how many.
Yeah,
So-
it'd be worth their time.
So for the health fair, we paid them $6 a plate. But this year, they've gone up. And so now for the health fair, because we have the food trucks and we give them the free food coupons, we have to do $8 a plate. So, but I don't know if they're all that. But like for the health fair, we give them all that. So we say, okay, we're giving out, this year we're giving out 400 free coupons because it was $8 instead of the 6. And we used to do that because we, would have the money from the coalition. But
Well, the food truck sounds safer and less complicated. I mean, health
Health department wise.
the health department wise, and a bottle of water. I mean, if we're going to do it, I think a lot depends on the cost of, and if that's going to be split with West Haven with us, and I guess figuring out if they're going to do it, figuring it out, just some variables.
So what
in
kind of
there.
deal can you give us? Because I'm sure there's owners of food trucks in Hooper and West Haven.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there are.
well, like Chichos, we got
Yeah,
10
Chichos
minutes
is-
in and not in the drink.
Yeah. And then we all have a drink.
Anyway.
Well, I guess we just need to decide if you want this, and we can pursue looking into food trucks, and I can ask West Haven. If you think it's something you don't want to do, then there's no reason to even take it any further than,
I would say ask West Haven first what they think, what they thought their,
if they
situation
want to do
was,
it. Okay?
and then sharing it, mention the food trucks or whatever, and I would just see what they think
Yeah.
about the whole
What do you
idea.
think,
I
Dale?
think that's go with them first.
I don't know.
You're opening a door, no doubt.
I'm 50.
You are opening a door.
Yeah, it's
Well, I
like-
just-
Yeah,
that's-
I just don't, but
It's a challenge.
just back in the day.
How do you tell a basketball team no if you tell a
I
football
know.
team yes?
Well, and then what do we do at the other schools?
Yeah.
Because I looked into prices of getting congratulations graduates, because I really like when they have those signs to put up.
Yeah.
But then I thought, okay, but we really need to do it we still have Fremont kids, and we will always, well, not always, but currently we have Roy High kids, and then we have the Davis County that go to Syracuse. So then how do we?
Just
They-
do a generic
I
congratulations.
Do they
know.
put a
With
little
the tomato with the
toothpick with a
graduation
sign on
cap
that
and
says,
call it good.
donated by Hooper City? I mean,
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
No, they probably wouldn't even know who was
Who
keeping.
provided it, so
No.
who serves them up?
It's a dilemma.
I doubt that the other teams do the pre-game meal. I've never heard of that before.
I haven't either.
Malcolm, do they do that in your football teams?
Do what?
Provide meals to them before the games?
It's always the parents.
I've never heard of it.
It's always the parents.
Yeah, orange slices.
Now the parents.
Halftime.
Well, that's the little baby kid. But no, I mean, yeah, at Roy, it's always the booster club
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's always
Yeah.
did it, so you know that.
yeah. What?
Maybe that's it. I've never heard of a city providing a dinner for a football team. That's just new.
They should use the money from their sponsors that they supposedly are getting, and put it towards the mills to feed them each week or whatever. That's,
Well, so I'll ask West Haven then
Yeah.
on Monday and see, but one, if West Haven says yes, then do we want to do it? I mean, that's what we need to maybe decide.
They may say, we'll do it if you do it.
I know, that might really be what it will be, because they will have kids, they also have kids at after this year, the graduating seniors at Fremont, we probably won't continue unless if some kids still want to go to Fremont, but we will always have Roy until they change the boundaries, maybe till Upper High.
No, another thing you do is just, if we go that route, just say, hey, we've got $500. Here you go. That's what we're gonna spend.
Yeah,
So it doesn't
that
get
might
some
be better,
like
just give it some.
$2,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I know our budget's tight and,
So how did we even get involved with this?
yeah.
Joni Platt called me and asked.
Oh.
And so she must have a son that's a football player. And then she texted me again today and said, what have you found out? And I said, oh, we have city council meeting tonight. I will ask them. But I think they want all of us to be there serving too, because it's supposed to be we're supporting, which I think things like that are really nice. I've seen before, I've been at other city council meetings and like a football team, like for example, Rocky Mountain won the football championship, I think, and West Haven recognized them because they're in West Haven. I mean, I think things like that are fun. I just didn't know on this, if this is something we.
I think they've got the right idea, but I don't know if it's the city that.
How many
Just
kids
the
do they
raw
have
vanity.
on the, so it's just varsity, right?
No,
They said it'd be
140.
140.
Oh,
140 players. She said it's sophomore, JV,
It's all of
and
it's all
varsity.
3 teams, even though it's just.
And-
Do we
and
know how
staff.
many Hooper kids are involved?
A lot.
Huh?
Yeah, we would have.
Most of your
quite
city,
a
probably.
few
Hmm?
kids.
what?
I would guess most of your city goes to that school or will.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah, unless they're on the
Yeah.
Davis County.
yeah. Or those kids that are south of 55, or excuse me, north of 55. Okay, so I don't really have an answer. Because if West Haven says they will, if we will, then what do maybe we,
So it's probably gonna be about $700, it sounds like.
I would think 700. I would think, and we could maybe get a little less than $10 a plate. She said they do provide the paper goods, and they just
Who would provide the paper goods?
The booster club.
Joni said they provide the paper goods, and they want to do it at Country Park. And she said the coach said they don't want anything really sugary, and if there is a dessert, he wants everybody to have the same thing. They don't want them to have a choice of desserts, so if it's brownies and everybody gets a brownie, doesn't want them to have a choice, and then they'll pick a brownie and a cookie and something else.
Or just
I
tell them
haven't-
to bring a peanut butter sandwich.
I have a neighbor that caters. Let me ask her if she could, I mean, because like pulled pork sandwiches, I don't know. Because those kids are going to eat a lot. They're not
Yes,
going to
they do.
They're not going to eat just what
No.
you and I eat. They're
Well,
going
even the empanadas with chichos.
They're gonna be hungry.
Yeah, you're going to be $1,400 or something.
For sure, yeah.
So we're doing pulled pork for tomato days, and it's
Oh.
going to be about $5 probably. Not for the pulled pork, it's about $2.50
Per
person for the
person.
pulled pork. Then you do baked beans, and it's about the same. And then you get buns and chips and desserts. Well, okay, decision, anybody?
No guidance from me.
I say check with West Haven, see
Yeah.
what their thoughts were on it, but
Yeah, I
I don't
think
think
if
it's
it
a
wasn't
have
the
to.
money, if we didn't
No, it
have to
wasn't.
worry about money, I would say, yeah, let's go for it. I think where
this is not the year to ask for extra money.
Well,
Yeah.
and even if it wasn't the money, though, then what we do with basketball.
yeah,
And then what do we do with volleyball?
and I'm
and
afraid that
track
that's going
and
to set a thing.
Soccer and, every single
Yeah,
team.
Or the kid from Hooper that's not on the football team.
Yeah, don't beat the kid from Roy, sorry.
yeah.
Don't beat the kid from West Haven or Taylor.
you
Okay,
know.
well, I'll ask West Haven then. I'll just tell Joni that we didn't decide.
Yeah. We were inconclusive.
You're thinking about it.
Yeah, they're still thinking
But I
about
think
that.
Deborah's point is like setting a precedence.
Yeah, if you want us to vote, I'm not really in favor of starting something like this. If you want to vote.
I would rather give them something of significance that is tangible other than just a meal. Like, hey, do you guys need some footballs? Or I'm sure they don't, but something of that nature. I would rather do that than feed them.
Oh, we pay a lot of money to the school district.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
For sure.
Well, you don't want to get people in the habit of coming here if they want to raise money for a good cause, because there are a lot of good causes out there, and it's, I think it's hard for you to be doing that.
Well, maybe we could even, if we didn't do this now, maybe if, and they won't, but if it, by some miracle, because they're in a really hard district that they put them in there. Yeah. If they won, then maybe we could have them come and we give them, recognize them at city council and give them something.
Yeah, something like
We're
that.
the ones that didn't
No,
feed
I'm
you.
still bothered by the donated organ, thinking, what do I have? Want my,
They want your heart.
Depends on which organ.
my liver?
I might
what-
give them a fingernail.
What organs are we doing? That's what we have to do to raise our budget. We've got to
Okay,
start donating.
well,
Start
okay, so
donating
should we
parts.
just say no?
Probably
Is
this
there anybody
year.
that's feeling strongly you want to do it?
I think the booster club should just do it. Figure out for themselves how to pay for it.
Because we really can't even say we'll donate 500 or whatever, because then we would be donating it for every sport.
Yeah,
And
that's
how do we
I think
pick and
it is-
choose what sport we do and which ones we don't?
think
I
it's
agree with you.
And
A
which
great
school?
idea, but not our job.
It's the wrong entity, maybe, not a city's job, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a booster club
Yeah,
or.
it's a good,
A good
But it's a
sponsor.
good thought.
it's the right decision.
At the time I
There's a
mentioned to
lot of big
Joni, we have
businesses
4
that-
schools, 4 high schools that Hooper feeds into.
Yeah,
And
it'd be
she-
different
and
if it was
she
just
said, well,
plain
but it's
city.
their inaugural year. Well, okay, it is, but
There's always a reason.
I mean, when it's Hooper High, it might be different. 'cause
Well, when
of
you
our-
mentioned the basketball and everything else, because if they might do it for all of them, and then they would think, well, you know, they did it for the
I know.
football.
Because
So,
it'll be all the inaugural.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
I
I tend to agree with
think
you
just
that
the
it would
booster club
probably be
should do
best
it.
not to do it.
Okay, is everybody okay then? We just tell them no?
Yeah.
Anybody feel bad if we do that? Okay, okay, I just wanted to give an update on 5500 West. We had a meeting on it yesterday, which I thought would be good, you can pass on. They said the road, so south of 4000 on 5500 West, the road will be opened a week from Saturday. And I said, I almost hate to say that, because what if it's not? So, but they said it will be, and just a little bit of an explanation with it. So, they had done the asphalt on it, and we had an independent report done that they come, and some of the asphalt did not meet up to standards. So if it's supposed to be 4, and I don't know if that's 4 inches, 4 mils, whatever it is. But anything that was less than 3.5 didn't pass. So if it was 3.5 or higher, it passed. Well, we had some that were lower than 3.5, even some that were 1.5. And so then they told them you have to redo it, which I really felt strongly that we should have them redo it. They said we are over budget on it, but and they said, so sometimes you can take a negotiated price then and say, well, we won't fix it. And then you end up getting so much money, but
But it
in the
wasn't our
long run,
fault, you know, it wasn't our fault, it was
Right.
their fault.
yeah,
Yeah,
the over budget things, I haven't received a breakdown yet of what the over budgets are, but 10 years from now, when the road is not holding like it's supposed to, we will not have that money to fix it.
Right.
So I think it was better to fix it. Okay, the part that is north of 4000, they said late September by the time it's going to have the asphalt on it.
So on the over budget, are they gonna try to come back to us to pay for that?
I think things that are over budget, I think the city will have to bear some of that cost, but
I would
But
like
not
to.
related to a
Oh, no,
part of the
not-
road that
not
didn't
the
meet
asphalt,
specs,
no.
right? Oh, okay.
No, it's not according to this asphalt, and I don't know what the over budget, when they were talking about this, they just said we are over budget.
I would
So,
like all of us to see that,
I-
because
I
I know
agree.
they have taken, I've
Yeah,
kind of
itemized
watched them,
list.
and they are so inefficient, it's incredible, just how they do things.
well, and
So
part
that's
of-
probably one of the reasons why they just took so long, and
Yeah, and
It's
part of it was
get a
getting
game plan
power
together.
poles moved, they said
Sure.
that was a problem. And so then, we talked about how we could go back to the power company and say, okay, you have to pay us X amount of money because you went over. But then there's,
You need to get
problems with
moved.
that too, because then some things we possibly held them up on. Anyway, it's just
Well,
It's a
how many
funny-
times do you hear that something didn't go over budget? I mean, that's a rarity these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
Or time.
So
Yes.
people ask, that's what they said, but like I said, it almost makes me nervous, but it's
I
been
would-
quite a process.
You know, when it comes to the power company, I think there's a, where we don't charge them to be in our right of way, but with that agreement is that they respond when we need them to move poles or things, and that really was a real hassle right from day one. They just took
That's
a lot of
all it
time,
was.
and they really should. That's part of the agreement. When we need help with something like that, they should respond to it, and because of the fact we don't charge them to put the poles where they are, and if they had to buy that, I mean, that'd be a lot more than what they'd ever cost them to just move the poles when we need it moved. So I'd use that, I'd bring that back to their attention.
Yeah, well, they said about, and that would be something, then have to write up a legal document to try to get them to come back and pay, and I don't know, when they were discussing it, they didn't know if we would get anywhere with it, and it may end up backfiring, because there's maybe times we've held them up that they didn't get it done, but I know the power
Well,
company has been.
yeah, but we haven't held the power company up. I mean, this would be with the power company,
just-
not,
Yeah,
anyway,
Yeah.
but,
yeah, but anyway, so that's.
Certainly a
what they said.
discussion issue.
huh?
Certainly a discussion issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a week from Saturday. So
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, but I told them one concern I have too is people don't know. That's been a big issue. People just want to know because it has gone on for, well, this is the second year. And when they said about north of 4,000 and it would be the end of September, possibly October, and I said, no, we're getting it done this year, and then it's going to roll over into next year. Because then it'll be too cold to do the asphalt, and we're not carrying this on to the third year, so this just has to be done. So, and it will be nice once it's done. It's just been a long time. Okay, so let's see if there was anything. Oh, I was going to give you a report on the house.
Yeah.
We're still waiting. We're still waiting for them to get back with us with an updated contract.
Well, they responded and said what they were going to do. I just haven't seen them actually do it.
Yes, they did, that's correct. They said they were going to, but then they didn't update the contract and put it in.
So can one of us call him? You know him, don't you?
Yeah.
Can,
Scott Larson.
let's have Dale call him
I
and
thought
just get
he-
it done.
Oh, so it's back in their court?
So there was a note to
Right.
them saying these are the things that are problems. They sent back a response to each one of those items saying, we'll fix this, this is how we'll handle this. But they've never
But they've
actually
never
sent
put
us a
it in the
contract
contract.
yet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So we're just still waiting. And one question, you probably saw it too, read about the lumen, that she said, where are we on the site? Well, haven't we already signed that? That came through today saying, where are we on the lumen? Are we ready to start? Isn't the lumen the one that's the Questar?
Yeah, that's Quest.
I know.
They really aren't Lumen for us, they're Quest. But
Quest.
you signed the contract and sent it back, I think, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we voted on it.
So
Yeah.
I don't,
So
it's
I
up
don't
to
know.
them to decide when they want to start, I guess.
Yeah, I don't, well, she just said, how are we on the contract? And I
So
thought-
this is the gal from Lumen?
Uh-huh.
Well, you better check and make sure they got the contract then,
Yeah,
because
because I'm sure we send that back to them, the Quest, the Lumen one.
Yes.
that, the most recent version was signed and sent back, Morgan? Okay. Well, maybe check with her, Morgan, and see if they haven't got it for some reason. Could have gotten, it was a hard copy, so it would have had to have gone in the mail.
I have a quick question about Connects. People are still having problems with them in their yards and stuff. Is there anything we can do, or, they're digging, they're leaving holes and everything else? Yeah.
So our daughter had a problem and actually called them and they came right out, which was surprising, because they have not been.
Yeah.
Read, this is what it said, it just came. I hope you're doing well, and I think, let me see if you got a copy. Yes, she said it went to you too. I hope you're doing well, I just wanted to reach out and see how this agreement is going with the readings and the council. Are we ready to execute? Boy,
Sounds like they, for some reason, don't have a copy,
Yeah.
so we better find out.
Uh-huh.
Because I think the last version they sent was acceptable to everyone.
Yeah, I think so too, and we approved it.
Then we voted on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. So we'll.
So it's ready to go, and if they haven't gotten it, we can print a new copy and sign it again, I guess. We do
Okay.
need something back from them, too,
So going back to the house, can Dale reach out to them? Is that okay?
Sure.
Appropriate?
I guess.
Just, you're
They
comfortable
thought it
with
was
that?
Morgan,
Yeah.
so say, you could call and say you're Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sound
Yeah,
Morgan.
just tell them, we
Morgan
just need the
Freeman.
contract. And I told Brandon, once we receive that, I'll just give it to Brandon just to do one more read-through, make sure everything's in there. And he said,
That's
that'd be
fine.
great. So we're,
Okay.
we're just waiting on them to get it back, so. Yeah. Okay.
So I got a couple things, just,
Okay.
so the first one is Darren Poole and Jared gave this to me. I was just in the office picking up something, and they wanted me to share this with you. Not that you're gonna understand it, but basically what they're doing with the sewer system, they're using this camera system, acoustic ray, I don't know. But what they can do is they can find out which lines needed to be cleaned in the sewer system. Rather than just doing the whole system, which costs a lot of money, they can identify through this new technology what's clogged and what needs to be cleaned. So on the first go around, I think they saved like $10,000. It would have cost us like, I don't know, 21,000 or something in it. So they saved about 11,000. So they're going to save significant amounts of not cleaning parts of the sewer system that doesn't need it, so they can identify where it is. So he wanted me to share that with you, and he
That's
gave it to
great.
me like
It's pretty clever.
a month ago. So, and we didn't have a meeting last 2 weeks, so I wanted to share that with you.
Nice.
Yeah, that is
And then
wonderful.
I just got a couple things. I just want to make sure I get these covered, just because we got. Do you have anything else?
No,
Okay.
I think that's everything.
So we had 3 people go through the CERT training. Jenny Stanger, Dave Harris, and Casey. I can't remember Casey's last name. And we told them that we would seek, and I believe we talked about in the city council, we'd seek that they could be reimbursed, and it's like $40. So if I remember correctly, we all kind of agreed on that the people that did the CERT training would do that, because we did initiate some funding for the emergency fund. 5% of the utility tax would go into that emergency fund, so there should be money in there. So the process, would they just come into Morgan
Yeah.
and request that?
Yes,
Morgan?
maybe, Morgan, should we even have maybe a separate form besides just a reimbursement form? Maybe we could have something that was a CERT reimbursement. Yes, just so they knew that it was CERT. Yeah, and they could just come and fill that out.
Yeah.
And then maybe even I don't know, in the future, we could even maybe pay with our credit card ahead of time or something if we know.
Sure, yeah.
Because for sure, the city should pay for that.
Yeah. I think it's probably better that they pay for it
Upfront.
first. That will give them incentive to go.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
then
just say you got to
upon
bring your
completion-
certificate to show you
Yeah.
finished it, and then we pay.
So upon completion, they get that, because I think I see what you're thinking, but I think it'd be better if we
Sure.
did it that way. So anyway, Jenny, Dave, and Craig, I'll let them know, or Casey, that they can be reimbursed. And then, so I'm gonna talk about something probably a little touchy, but that's okay, because I've had people reach out to me, and so it's my responsibility to pass this along. So it's regarding the properties that the city owns. Lynn Perkins called me, it's probably been 6 weeks ago, and he was pretty upset about how all that happened, because verbally, in our city council, verbally, we agreed that he could run it this year, and then he came to do it, and evidently it was given to somebody else. So I think in the future, we probably ought to rotate that through, or 1 year Lynn does it, the next year, or we got to figure out a better system, because he was pretty upset, and how that went down. And I can't say I don't blame him, because we did verbally agree that he would take care of that. So this year, and he wasn't able to. And I don't know who's doing it.
It was Ray
Hancock.
Hancock in that meeting, because I actually went back and listened to the minutes to make sure, because in the minutes I said someone had already asked, because Ray had already asked, and so we just have to go with the first person. And I spoke with Lynn too.
Did
He
ya?
came in.
Okay.
But we've talked about this, Reed and I.
For all city
For
property,
all
the
city
land,
property.
the water, anything
Yeah.
the city owns that other people are using needs to be dealt with by the council, and needs to be equitable and not just given to somebody because they ask for it.
Yeah.
I think a good thing would be to rotate it,
Give the
so that,
people who are interested in doing it.
So people who are interested in that, we can rotate it around so that
Sure.
it seems more equitable for individuals.
Yeah.
And I, maybe keep a list of who's interested and just rotate through them.
Well-
And then everybody would feel, like they had a part or a share of it.
And we'd even talked about, reading I had about, maybe there should even be a small amount, a small rental, not just the land, but the water shares, because we have water shares that currently people are using that we have no accountability of who's using the water and who's paying to use those water shares, and so we,
Yeah, and I think you got to be a little careful with city property. I think back on a fellow who was actually a friend of mine. I think he was sheriff in Carbon County, and he used a county trailer to haul his daughter's belongings because she was going to school in St. George. That got huge press and ended up throwing him out of office for something as simple as using the county trailer to haul stuff to St. George. So you just got to be careful with that kind of thing because it can get you in a mess.
yeah. So
If it's done, it needs to be done openly. The council needs to approve it and
Yeah.
hear any complaints.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to open it up if we have a certain time, like when we open up for rentals, for example.
Yeah.
Then maybe it just needs to be a straight, these are the properties that we have, people interested in renting them, and maybe it could be a lottery system, or I don't know, sometimes they,
Yeah, something. I think then everybody feels like they've got a fair shot at everything, and it's just kind of an open process for everyone.
So,
I think
so
that's-
now the next one is the the tower property. So I've had people call me about equipment being parked on the road, the weeds, and that kind of thing. So I'm just relaying information, but I think whoever's doing that needs to clean it up and maintain it per our agreement.
are you talking about KSOS?
No, I'm talking about the tower, the one your son runs,
Oh, KSOS,
or wherever it's at.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
it's over
KSOS.
there.
KSOS, yes.
So I've had
Lose
people
your
reach out to me,
bearings
so
inside.
it might be a little touchy subject, but we need to talk about it.
No,
I mean,
because it's a city subject.
it is
so
a
it's not a
city property, so it
Yes,
looks,
and we need to do something.
yeah, it doesn't look very, maintained right now, and I think Blake probably needs to maintain it, and keep the equipment off the road. Those are the complaints I've had, so I'm conveying that, and I'd have to say I agree with that. He should maintain it just like somebody else would, like it's his own property.
So we, and this, will be a discussion that because we really have got to do something with this. It doesn't look nice. It doesn't around the pickleball courts, and we do not have the money to be able to do anything around the pickleball courts. The way that it was engineered, as low as it is, because we talked about this, no one can plant like pasture grass and flood it, because the pickleball courts are actually lower than the ground level, and it would flood. So that's really not a...
That's the area I'm not talking about. I'm talking about where the fence is.
Yeah, but
So
anyway,
that,
you could plant
that's kind of insignificant.
grass.
We could do gravel and
Well,
not have to
but
irrigate it.
again, it's money. So that is something we need to get on our plan, is what are we going to do with it? Because it is unsightly. It's weeds. We have great big dirt hills that we need to do something with. So we need to get on the plan. What do we want to do with that to make it look better? Do we want to do grass? Do we want to do sprinkling system? Do we want to do more parking lot? So we only gravel, but somewhere that needs to be a plan with a budget.
I think we have
So-
this phase 2. There is a plan. There is an RV dump station in that, which I don't think would cost very much. Would take up a significant amount of that property. But anyway, so I need to tell these people, is Blake gonna do the weeds or not? That's
Blake's right here. What weeds are you talking about?
the ones in the fence, around the fence.
So you're
Around the
talking about
building.
around the building?
Yeah, around the building.
Around the building, Blake doesn't lease. That's the city.
Well, I was under the impression he leased the whole thing.
No, not. And you're right. Around the,
That looks pretty bad.
it looks really
Then we
bad.
need
And
to
me as
clean it
someone
up.
across the street, if it wasn't me, would complain. It's a
Yeah.
mess, and we have had.
Isn't that Public Works? Isn't that the Parks Department?
I guess. I don't know.
Is there a
I
park
thought I thought you rented the whole thing. So, because I've seen your
What is the
equipment
agreement?
inside the fence, so.
Is it just this north side of the building, or?
What is the agreement, Blake?
I think it just says the unused part that I gotta run it until the city decides to develop it or use it.
Okay, well, I guess we gotta find out and see whose responsibility is to clean it up.
Yeah,
I
so
can-
in front of the building,
Yeah.
you're right, it's
It
a
looks
mess.
bad.
Yeah.
And we've had complaints turned in because there is a fire hydrant. You can't even see the fire hydrant because
Yeah.
there's so many weeds. And that's what we were talking about on that north side, is we would plant pasture grass that would look so much nicer, but you can't because it'll flood.
You're
So-
talking about the south side. North side, you can, it's
South
already
side.
lined.
North side of the pickleball courts,
North of the pickleball.
East.
north of the pickleball courts.
Between the pickleball courts and the building?
Yes, yes, because it's lower, when they did the engineering, the pickleball, anyway, that doesn't, there's nothing we can do about it, it's already done, but we need to have a plan, that's the thing,
Well,
we
I
need to
think
see
if
what
we,
money,
I
so.
think if we get someone that does or not agriculture, gosh, just a minute, I'll think.
Deerscape, landscaping?
Landscaping.
Landscaping, that they can come in with an idea of something and we can work from that plan. I think we just need to do that. And
Yeah,
I don't think
absolutely.
they're that much money that we can at least get that, because you've got to have a game plan to start from.
We do,
So-
it's probably several thousand,
Burn it
because
out right
everything
now.
is, everything
What's
is
up?
Push it, burn
thousands.
it out right now.
So we just need to figure out what we're going to do, because there is a plan. Like, if you look on the plan, they have additional pickleball courts. I don't know when, though, we will ever have money to be able to do additional pickleball courts.
Or if they're needed.
Or if we want additional pickleball courts, or do we want more parking lot? Jared, we had talked about doing like maybe some roto-mill or something in the front that people could park, because we don't have enough parking lot. So that could be an option.
Yeah.
But somehow we need
So
to
if you
come
get
up
the-
with,
What's that?
Maybe you get this one.
Well,
You got a copy of it.
and there's also the
Oh, yeah.
xeriscaping.
This is
and
the one, that's
different
why I had
things like
questions
that.
on.
No, that's the one I don't think we
I
gotta,
mean-
I think gotta not pass it.
Right, but.
Recording in progress.
That's just my
we've got
I wanted to
figure
know
out a
these.
way, and
I
we
wanted
need
you to
someone to guide us.
I read through them.
Well, the interpretation is,
So I think that's
anything that's underlined is new language, anything that is not underlined is old, existing
This
language.
actually talks about prior
Right.
ordinances and
Yeah, that's already there, that's prior, because it's not underlined. The only thing new are the underlined
Well, I
stuff.
mean, that
So that's
might
already
be where
in
we
this-
can
in
start
the
to
code.
rent that.
But my problem is, I don't think you ought to
Huge weed here. I can't even
let
prevent my
neighbors
tractor.
agree that
It's
you're not
just
gonna build a fence.
It has
terrible
been.
for weeds this year, so. And
I think
would
that just,
guess that
that's
part of
gonna
the
just
construction
feed all
along
sorts of
there
problems.
unless they're,
Hardly.
oh, yeah.
Well, the neighbors now are not gonna be the neighbors in a year. You don't have the ultimate landowner that's gonna buy from the subdivider as part of that agreement. So your fence is to protect both sides, and you don't even know who that person is yet. So how do you make an agreement when you don't know who it is? And I don't think it's fair to have somebody going to their neighbors and trying to twist their arm to get them to waive the thing so that they can save any money. I think it's a bad deal. So anyway, that's
For
just
the gas to do it, but then we were out.
Yeah,
So no, we just need to get a plan.
Yeah,
Now that's
yeah.
a good idea.
There needs to be a punch
you
list,
agree with that?
public works.
Maybe you couldn't hear it.
Oh, he's
But I
talking
do
about the
think
fence.
the
Fence.
list of who's renting what,
Oh, I think the way it's
and
written,
where,
that's good.
Yeah.
and,
Is that what you're,
maybe the lottery
than-
for the upcoming year, January. I don't know
I
when
think
we
that's
do
a
it.
great idea.
I think it's,
I'll let him explain it.
I think it's a bad idea.
You know, people
oh,
can
this resolution is about
I think so.
what they want to, and we have, I don't know if I mentioned this before, there's like 42 pieces of property that we should look at, and something maybe we could sell. Maybe there's, I know, Senator Campbell had mentioned the jealous something was.
Well, it clarifies, but makes it law that you can get the neighbors to agree and not to put a fence. And I think that's
Yeah, so then what?
something you'd want to think real
What
hard
we do
about.
with it, I don't know, but,
Having the neighbors agree to not build a fence, I think is something you want to really think hard about.
yeah.
Start.
Yeah.
So
There's
like,
the reason,
like over there at Zog's place, you know, if they all agree not to build a fence, then that's probably a bad thing because they might sell it or something.
Wedding, his son's wedding.
Oh,
It's tomorrow.
okay. Do you think he has to get ready for that? I don't
I think
understand.
they were going to there
who's getting married?
Ryan's son's.
Oh, I think he's busy then.
How's your hip doing?
We would like to welcome you to City Council meeting. It is August the 15th, and we're always happy to have all of you here. We are going to go ahead and have our opening ceremony. Councilmember Bowers is going to give the Pledge of Allegiance, and Councilmember Wilcox will give the reference.
Everybody please stand. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, come before this night to discuss Hooper City's affairs. We ask that would be with us, and we're so grateful for the community we live in, the freedoms we enjoy for our country. We're so grateful for those men and women who strive and serve to protect us and keep us safe. Bless them and their families. And thank you for the citizens of this community, and I pray that we'll make good decisions that are wise. And we'll say it's only in Jesus Christ.
Thank you. So, first up, we would like to introduce Malcolm Jenkins. He is our new city planner. He's sitting right over here, Malcolm. We're really happy to have him, and he isn't here tonight, but we have hired a new road supervisor, and his name is Cody Stevens. And so he was going to try to pop in, but maybe we will see him some other time. We are going to go ahead and turn some time over to Erin Mon, who is our community events coordinator, and let her talk about upcoming things.
Basically, I'm just here to beg your participation for Hooper Tomato Days, for the information booth and the rodeo sales. And Mayor Bingham said that you can bring your spouse. That helps to double our numbers, and any participation would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. She has been working so hard on Tomato Days, and it's coming up really quickly, and we appreciate everything that she has done with that. I have just an announcement I want to make. We announced this before, but coming up this Monday, August 19th, the Central Weaver Sewer Improvement District is going to have a meeting. This is a notice of the proposed tax increase, and it will be held at 6 o'clock p.m. at the admin building, which is the district offices, 2618 West Pioneer Road in Marriott-Slaterville. And so you should go and hear this because this is affects your taxes. There is one other upcoming event that I wanted to announce. So the Western Weaver County Active Transportation Plan, they have different workshops, and there is going to be 2 workshops held on Thursday, August the 22nd. And both of those are also held at the Marriott-Slaterville. One of them is from 2:30 until 4 o'clock. The other one is from 5:30 until 7 o'clock. And just a little bit what it tells us is the purpose of this project is to promote active transportation by increasing access to non-motorized trail systems in the communities of Hooper, Roy, West Haven, Marriott-Slaterville, and Plain City. And go to this. I've been before, and it was really interesting because they will show you the trail system and then have you go along and try to help see how we can maybe coordinate those and get those better here in Hooper. Okay, so the next thing we have is public comments. Is there anybody that has any public comments? And remember, on public comments, you have 3 minutes. Come up and state your name and your address in the microphone. One thing we wanted you to be aware of, our meetings are live, and we found out we've just done one, but we need to make sure that we're speaking into the microphones. All of us up here need to make sure we're speaking those there, because if you say things from the audience, people really cannot even hear that. Okay, so back to public comments. Does anybody have a public comment they would like to make? Okay. Okay, if not, then we're going to move on to our consent items. And the first thing is the approval of the minutes dated July 18th, 2024. Council members, have you had a chance to review the minutes? There is just one thing that I noticed, and it was when they were talking about the 5100. It's under number 8, and it is B, and it has the interlocal agreement, and it says about hoping to start the project in the spring on the west side of the road. This will actually be on the east side of the road, and they will make a temporary walkway for the students. Was there anything else, any on the minutes?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from July 18th, 2024.
Okay, the motion was made by Councilmember Fowers. Is there a second? Second was made by Councilmember Maragoni. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Okay, so we're really happy tonight. We're going to be having some presentations. The first one we are going to have is from the Hanson Planning Group, and they're going to be joining us with Zoom. So what this Hanson Planning Group is there were some state regulations that have came out that is talking about 1 lot and 2 lot subdivisions. And so we secured some state funding to pay for this. And so they're going to go through and explain this to us. This will then go back to Planning Commission for their recommendations, and then it will come back to City Council for final approval.
So they're on Zoom, so, yeah, we can.
Okay.
Will you ask them if they can hear us? They can't hear us.
Can you hear us? Can you hear me talking?
I can hear you talking. Can you hear us?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Now we can. Okay, thank you. We appreciate you being here tonight. So we can see you. You have an audience here with Hooper City Council, and we'll have you go ahead and explain this to us, and there might be some questions concerning it. So thank you.
All right, hello everyone. So we're here representing Hanson Planning Group. I'm Jacob Hanson, the younger Hanson of this group. And like was said, we're on contract with the state. We have no local money, but we're updating the city's subdivision ordinances to comply with some recent changes in state law. So this is pretty trippy. I can see myself from the camera vantage point up here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's all right. Hopefully I have permission to do that.
Yes, you do.
I've got a short presentation. It really won't take very long. Let's see. All right. So like I said, this presentation won't take long. Really, all we're going to do is discuss a little bit about what changed this last legislative session and the year before that actually with state laws. Then we're just going to go over the process that we've designed for the city. We've actually already workshopped this a little bit with the Planning Commission and some staff, and I think we have a pretty good process, but obviously want to bring the City Council in on everything before we go with try to get the Planning Commission to make a recommendation. Then we have 2 hot button topics that we want to discuss with you, and then we have a little bit of a roadmap as far as where we'll go from there. And then if you have any questions, feel free to just chime in, or we can answer them at the end. So let's dive right in. The way we, just from a 30,000 foot level, the way that we interpret these new changes in state law is that the state is trying to make subdivision applications a purely administrative process. So this slide is just to help you have the right perspective for understanding this law and explain why the state is making some of the changes that they are. The way that we see it working is that you start with all of your land use approvals, and that's going to be a totally separate process. So Even though the state has walked back a little bit of the city's power to regulate subdivisions, the city still has a lot of power, especially the city council, to define zoning and set all of the applicable standards and ordinances that anyone who wants to subdivide or develop in the city has to follow. So here's an overview of what exactly the law changed. There were actually two laws. One was in 2023, that's SB 174. And the legislature made it confusing enough that they had to come back again this year with HB 476 and fix a few things. Unfortunately, it's still confusing. The most important thing is that these subdivision regulations apply only to applications for single-family, two-family, and townhome. So, you got your single-family, duplex, townhome. Other applications for commercial, industrial, agricultural, even large-scale multifamily are technically outside of these regulations. The one question later on is whether, while we're making these changes to your subdivision code, you want the process that we're going to apply to cover everything, or just the narrow residential categories that the state has singled out for us. Currently, the Planning Commission was recommending, or excuse me, perhaps I was just city staff we met with, they were recommending that this process should apply narrowly, and then giving the city as much leeway as possible. But other high-level items are that the city council is now excluded from being the land use authority for subdivision applications. Again, this goes back to land use from the legislative side being separate, where your role now is to make sure that the ordinances are thorough and up to date, you have good standards, good processes, and then after that, when someone submits an application, it's got to be either staff or the planning commission who run that process. There were some other changes that specifically related to subdivision improvement plans. This is typically the really technical part of an application where you have your construction drawings and your engineering plans, and it says, we're going to split up the lots with a plat, but we're also going to build street lamps and roads and maybe a trail, utility connections, things like that. So traditionally, you include those in a subdivision application because you want to make sure that before you let people start selling off individual lots, there's a plan to make sure that all of the infrastructure is built. So even though the state law technically focuses on these improvement plans, because they're so integral to the subdivision process, really that is affecting the whole application process. And what does that change, you ask? Well, for one, you can only consider these improvement plans in either the preliminary or the final application. Don't ask me why the state decided to do that, it doesn't make any sense, but that's what they did. When you consider these, and again, we're just lumping this into the whole bundle of when someone submits an application, you essentially have 4 opportunities to review it and provide feedback to the applicant. And then after the city has reviewed it, you have 15 business days for each of those cycles. Then you have to either approve or deny the application. And finally, the state law really binds the city's hands where if the applicant complies with all of your local ordinances and doesn't have something crazy on their application that's going to pose a health or safety issue, then you have to approve them. So what we're thinking of this as is, rather than the traditional approach, which is a default no, and then the applicant has to prove their worth to you, really the state law is changing this to a default yes for subdivision applications, and it's on the burden's on the city to prove how an application doesn't comply or poses a danger. So that's like the overview, and here's this, and then on the next slide I actually have a flowchart that's going to break this down. But in order to comply with all of these restrictions, we tried to develop a process that gives the city as much leeway as possible, because the 15-day turnaround is pretty tight, and we recognize that, and so we've done as much as we can to give the city more flexibility with this. So one thing that we've done is we've actually combined the traditional preliminary and final applications into one process. One of the reasons we did this is because the Planning Commission is restricted from being the land use authority for final applications, but it can be for preliminary applications. So we thought, well, why don't we just treat it all like one giant preliminary application, and the Planning Commission can run the whole process. The alternative to this would be the Planning Commission works out whatever it's going to work out in the preliminary application, and then you have some city staff, maybe your public works director or your engineer or someone like that, give the final stamp of approval afterward. One thing that we've also done is make the city council the appeal authority, so you will have still some involvement in this process, even if it's removed. And then finally, we've really focused on your application processes, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at our draft yet, but we're trying to make your application requirements as thorough as possible, so you're not stuck in a position where you wish you would have asked for something, or your ordinance doesn't say a developer has to provide it, but you need it to really assess the situation. So we've mixed in what the state requires with what the city previously in its existing ordinances has been requiring for plats and improvement plans. And then we've also mixed in a few other points that we've seen as best practices. So here's what the process that we've developed looks like, just from a high level, of course. It starts with a pre-application meeting. This meeting is actually mandated in the state law. It says that if a developer wants to meet with you before they formally submit an application, someone from the city's got to meet with them. And honestly, I think the city should recommend this heavily, because there's no, aside from the developer trying to get you to make their plan for them, there's really no downside to doing this. It's outside of the review process, those limited cycles and deadlines. So it's just an opportunity for the developer or the applicant to run their plan and their plat by you. After that, the clock starts ticking once they submit a complete application. And we've defined that really clearly, but essentially once the applicant gives you everything that you could possibly need, then you start this review cycle process. The city has 15 business days to look it over and get back to the applicant with a comprehensive list of everything that needs to change. Then it goes back to the applicant, they've got a certain amount of time to get back to you, and so on and so forth. In that process, the Planning Commission can hold a public hearing if they need to, but that is optional because really the point of this is to make the whole subdivision process an administrative process. And so while there is a place for neighbors or other residents to come and speak to the Planning Commission and say, hey, we noticed that the grading on this lot is way too steep, or we have flooding in this area, those technical reasons. It isn't really an opportunity for the public to say, I don't like development, I want this to stay rural and things like that. That's all going to happen in the land use part of this debate, which is before the subdivider submits an application. So anyway, you get through all the review cycles, maybe you get to 4, maybe you are done with 2 and the application looks good. At that point, the Planning Commission needs to approve it or deny it. If it's denied for whatever reason, then the Planning Commission can point to specific ordinances that say or that justify that denial. Then the subdivider can just restart the process and hopefully is compliant this time. Afterward, it's just standard things like signing the plat, making sure that improvements are guaranteed, recording the plat, and then notifying any affected entities. Again, just as a reminder, this process, as we've currently drafted it, only applies to applications for 1 to 2 family residential use. The way we've drafted this is that it's actually a standalone chapter that we're going to stick at the end of your current land use and subdivision title. This also does apply to minor subdivisions, just insofar as those minor subdivisions are for residential use, this overlaps with those. But we're going to keep all of the minor subdivision processes and exceptions that you currently have, because typically with minor subdivisions, there isn't a plat requirement, which makes it a lot easier, and then there are fewer improvement requirements, because typically when you minor subdivide, there's already a road there, there's already utility connection potential, and so we're going to keep that process unless you tell us to get rid of it. Now, here are 2 hot topics that we identified with the staff, and maybe you'll have others after this. The first one is this idea of death by 1,000 cuts, which happens when you have a developer essentially abuse the minor subdivision process, where you have a large parcel and then you just start subdividing a little at a time and you work your way through the whole thing. And at the end of the day, rather than what was supposed to have an official plat and a whole lot of improvements, just ends up being this hodgepodge of development. And your city staff said that was definitely an issue that you want to avoid. And so one solution that we have is this provision up here. This isn't the only way to do it, but we figure if you put a rule in there that says that you have to essentially divide parcels into similar lot sizes, and that's going to prevent you from shaving off a few parcels at a time from a larger tract. The other approach to this would be to, and by the way, this is not mandated by the state. If you don't want us to throw in this restriction, we don't have to. But another version would be to have a restriction on the timeline. So say that an original plat can only be subdivided X number of times in X number of years. Both of these approaches have downsides, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on that in a minute. The second one is that we've been, again, just going through your subdivision application requirements to make sure that they are as tight as can be. But at the end of the day, it's a good idea to have your engineer and all of yourselves take a look at the code and make sure that we're not missing anything. So moving forward, this is our roadmap for what we're going to do moving from here. Assuming you want us to continue with this and you don't hate what we've done so far, then we're going to integrate all of the city's comments into the existing subdivision and zoning title. And like I was saying earlier, we're going to actually include it as a chapter at the end. So the draft you're looking at, or I think you had the opportunity to look at, is formatted as just that chapter. It's not including the whole title. And the idea there is that if it's a subdivision for commercial or anything that falls outside of the state's bill, that's going to stick with your regular process. You're still the land use authority and are going to call the shots on that. So the subdivision title, or this new title, will just be very limited. Once we've done that and we've integrated all of your comments, you'll need to adopt it. And then at or around the time that we're adopting, we're going to create applications for you so that your clerk or your other staff, as soon as they get an application, they're going to be able to turn around with those forms, which the state requires you to have. So that's pretty much everything that I have. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and then let me know if you have any questions, and we're happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. City Council, do you have questions?
Reed, you might have to do all those little things.
Each one of those is a different mic.
Yep.
They're all up.
Let's see, I'm not hearing any audio. I don't know if that's me. Might just be big.
We just wowed them into some reverence right there.
I can hear it now.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, when did we cut out? Hopefully it wasn't early in the presentation.
No, we heard you.
We heard you the whole time, yes.
Okay, good.
So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
So the developer comes in and has a proposal for a subdivision. That subdivision has to comply with our current zoning, is that right? Because they don't have.
That's right.
Okay. So
Yeah, we specifically removed the whole zoning, variance, conditional use process out of the subdivision process. So in our current draft, before you submit an application, you have to prove to the city that current ordinances permit this use by right, or you got to produce a variance or a conditional use permit or something like that.
So that's really the only leverage we have from your presentation.
That is the main leverage for these 1 to 2 family residential ones, yes.
Well, they also, under your version, would be the appellate authority. So if either side, the city or the developer, doesn't agree with what the planning commission does, they can appeal it to you.
So I have a question on when the actual time begins. Do you have a plan of when a developer comes in and applies, kind of a checkoff sheet that the staff would have that, okay, you've got this, and if something's incomplete, like you don't check off something, he doesn't have it, the staff could just send him back and say, okay, this is incomplete, and the time does not start at that point until he returns with a complete application. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. We have that currently written into the draft, a description of that process, but then as part of your application forms, they're going to have, name of the applicant and, the engineer who made the plan and all that. but then it's going to be a checklist of everything that is in your ordinances with all of the forms and things at the end that they need to sign to dedicate the land and stuff like that. And so whoever the city is going to be receiving these applications will first look at the documents, compare it with the form, and like you said, make sure that they have all of the different pieces. And if one of them is missing, then the timeline doesn't start, and you just say, well, your application isn't complete, here's why, please provide, X, Y, Z. If all of the boxes are checked, but say some of the requirements aren't exactly complying with the city ordinances, that's a different story. So in that case, you'd say, yeah, you have a plat, but your plat doesn't comply with XYZ ordinance, and that would be within the review cycle, because obviously someone's got to review the plat, like the planning commission, the engineer, everyone like that, and then you point out the discrepancies, and that's all in the review process. But just as far as seeing is a certain application requirement included, yeah, that's outside of the process.
So that's a critical point that you bring up. It's called the vesting doctrine. So when is an application vested? Because according to this new law, there's like a timer on the city side. Yeah, it is. You saw in Jake's presentation. So you have to act within a certain number of days, and so it's really hard for a town to say, well, and I only get to act 4 times, and so, I'd like you to have it as right as possible. Now, most towns and engineers will tell you there's no such thing as a perfect application, so, that's why we just need to say it's got to have the issue addressed in the application. It doesn't have to be perfectly all the way engineered just to find out that it isn't going to match where the city's wanting to go.
So the biggest change here is taking the city council out of the approval process for subdivisions. Out of the cities that you've worked with, how many have taken the council completely out of that decision process?
All of them.
Well, they haven't liked it.
Yeah, none of them have liked it. That's a good way to say it.
None of them liked it, you say?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a black and white sentence in the new statute that you can't have city council involved. They just don't want it to be a politically influenced process. They say it should be, executive branch, so to speak, like an administrative process. So you can't have your city council involved. You can have your planning commission involved under certain circumstances, but even the final, it needs to be more of a technical sign-off than, an elected official.
But it does go to the planning commission at some point or not? Originally I thought it did if all the boxes are checked. I thought it did go to the planning commission, or does it not go to any city officials?
So it does, you're right, it does go to the planning commission the way that we drafted it, because the state law essentially gives you 2 options, and one of them is to have a division between your preliminary and your final applications. And in that case, the planning commission can only be involved in the preliminary phase. Then you need some random staff member to sign off afterward. The way we've drafted it, though, is the second approach, which is essentially only a preliminary phase. So it's just a combined process where the planning commission runs everything.
Any of you guys want to come back to the planning commission?
So essentially, it's the closest you can get to your current process with, as much planning commission involvement possible.
So administratively, what's going to happen is this proposal you have here will go to the planning commission. They'll work on it. Probably going to take them some time. I don't think they're going to do it immediately. They're going to have to integrate that into the ordinances as they exist, and amend others that might need amending because of this. And then they'll finally come up with their approved copy, and then that will come up to you for final approval.
If we get everything in order up front, though, like we should, if we have, like you mentioned, the checklist, if we have everything when they come in, by the time it does go to planning commission, it should be a more simplified process, because if they don't have everything done, then they go back and then they have to, when they bring it to you, everything should have already been approved, and it'll first start with Malcolm, our city planner, and make sure all of that is in order.
Correct.
Are we talking about 2 different things here? That's what I thought.
But they're both important.
They're both important. That's what I was going to say. They're both very critical. So for this subdivision,
my point was how you adopt this whole thing once it's done.
Correct.
The mayor's point was
how do you get after the planning commission and
Yeah, I'm
everything?
reassuring Blake, it'll be okay. When you get it, hopefully it'll be there, ready to go, so.
Correct. So for this ordinance, though, since this is new city policy, you're right, the planning commission has to get comfortable with it first, then they hold a public hearing on it, and then they make a recommendation to city council, and then the city council actually can choose to hold a public hearing or not. But either way, the state statute says you're supposed to have this adopted, before the end of the calendar year, and anyway, and then you're off to the races. But when we recommend that when you adopt it, that you put our team on getting the application forms and everything, because honestly, if you adopt it without, a date, 15 days from now or whatever, an active date for that ordinance, then somebody could come into the desk and they're vested in the new process with an old application form, which is no point. We're not going to do that to you, so. But your planning commission hopefully doesn't have to do a lot of work other than get comfortable with the changes the state is inspiring us all with. And we're doing all the legwork as far as the edits and the application forms and all that kind of thing.
When's the state requiring this to be implemented by the city? This new statute?
Right.
Yeah, so there's,
Go ahead.
that's right. Oh, so yeah, so the end of the year is when most municipalities have to, so this process starts applying, though there were some edits that the state made this last year, the HB 476, and that date is actually, it's set to go into effect in November. So you have those two different dates, and it's kind of confusing which one is the real date, but yeah, sometime before the end of the year at least.
Any other questions, comments from City Council? Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate this. So what we'll do this next, then, it will be on Planning Commission agenda, and then they will go through and review it and see, and staying in close contact with you to make sure that we get all the forms, everything we need filled out correctly, and then when they make their recommendations, it will come back to City Council.
And maybe even before the planning commission, you probably ought to get with Brandon, who's the city attorney that handles that type of thing, I think you know him, and work it through so he's comfortable with it as well as you.
What's Brandon's last name there?
Excuse me?
Brandon's last name?
Same as mine, Richards.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We appreciate all their work on this. This is something that needed to be done, so thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, so next up we have a presentation from Stephanie Russell, who is our Weber County Development Director, and she has provided us with some slides. And so, Stephanie, if you want to come up.
Sure, really quick. They just asked if they could switch.
Oh,
so we're going to
sure.
have Rob go first
Okay.
and then Stephanie
Yep.
will.
Okay, so first we're going to have Rob Sampman, who is from Urban and Maine Group, and he will do his presentation. He's going to be, well, he can introduce
Thanks so
himself.
much, Mayor. Yep, thanks, Council. So I'm Rob Sant. I'm the president at Urban and Maine Consulting, economic development consulting firm here in Utah. Previous to when I created my own firm, I worked for Lewis, Young, Robertson, and Birmingham, which is one of the big consulting firms in Utah. And then I was also the Davis County Economic Development Director before that. This is kind of my expertise as my firm. I've created over 50 of these tax increment financing areas in Utah. And so as you may be creating one in the future on a commercial development, the mayor thought it would be a good idea for me to come in and kind of give you an overview on the history of tax increment financing, what it is, why they're created, and the process for creating one, just in case that you decide to do that as a city council. And then Stephanie will follow me, and she'll discuss kind of how Weber County is involved in that process and talk about some other financing tools. Yeah, that's great, thanks. So redevelopment agencies or community reinvestment agencies, they're governed by Utah Code 17C, and they've been around since the 1980s. It's kind of the financing tool that the state has given local municipalities to help generate development when development might not be able to be generated without some sort of financial tool. There's 4 different types of project areas that can be created according to the code. Community development areas, economic development areas, and urban renewal areas, all of their own acronyms. And then since 2016, they combined all of those into just being known as community reinvestment areas. And this is just a little more detail on those. So from 1989 to 1983, these are called pre-1993 projects, and they were RDAs. Then in 1993, they created the URA and the EDA project areas. So urban renewals, or URAs, were for removing blight in a city. And then EDAs were all about high-paying jobs. So to create an EDA, it had to be combined with a company that's going to pay well above the median incomes in the county. And then in 2006, they noticed that there was a large group of projects that didn't really fit those 2 hats. So they created CDAs, or community development areas, and that was kind of a catch-all for all other type of development that wasn't job creation or to remove blight. And then the legislature decided to confuse us all and said, hey, let's combine everything and just call it a CRA. So that's where we are today, is if you were to create a project area, it would be known as a community reinvestment area. And then something that is also to note, what you would do first is if you decided to create a CRA, is you would need to create the Hooper Community Reinvestment Agency. It's a separate entity, but you as the city council would be the board of the agency, but you would meet separately. So typically what happens is you have a city council meeting, and then you adjourn as the city council, and you don't go anywhere, and then you reconvene as the agency, and do all of your public business as the agency, and then you would adjourn as the agency and reconvene as the city council. But it is important to note that it's 2 separate hats, and so sometimes you would act as the city council, and then other times you would take off that hat and put on your reinvestment agency hat. So let's talk about tax increment. So tax increment, or TIF, is what a lot of people call tax increment financing. It's the main resource of funds that an agency has to help spur development. So the first thing that's important to note, and this is a confusion point for a lot of people, is it's not a tax increase. Property taxes are frozen in the creation year of a project. It's known as the base year. So let's say you have an area and it's collecting $10,000 in property tax. The taxing entities would continue to receive that $10,000, but then anything that's built on that area that increases, let's say that $10,000 to $50,000, a piece of that is what's called tax increment, and that is what the agency receives to help with development. So, and then the other thing just right there is taxing entities are entitled to a tax increment agreement. They agree to rebate a percentage of that increment back to the agency to help with that new development for a certain period of time. And the next few slides here kind of just show examples of that as a way to explain it. So this is a graph that someone created that kind of shows the brown area. That would be that base tax, where it's frozen. So the taxing entity doesn't lose any money. They keep on receiving the taxes that they received. And then as new incremental development is built on top of that brown, where that red is, that's that tax increment, which is used to pay for long-term debt, infrastructure, to help recruit businesses. There's a lot of different things that you could use that tax increment for. And then this is just kind of a graph that shows the dark green would be that base year value of $1 million. The marginal value would be that increased number, which is $4 million in this example. So your new assessed value would be $5 million. And then over on the right side, you have that total $5 million. You reduce the base year, since the taxing entities still get that, and that leaves you $4 million. And then you see kind of what a tax rate would be, and it would generate about $5,300 a year in taxes. And then the city says, hey, we'll give you 75% of that. And so the agency would receive about $4,000 for the revenue to do the development. And then this is kind of just what tax increment can be used for. So it can go towards existing businesses to help them. It can be used for new development, to improve infrastructure, for affordable housing, to reduce crime, to expand employment opportunities, or any other community concerns and priorities that you as an agency would identify. And then why do you create a CRA? So prior to creating any sort of area, you would want to, as an agency, conduct a justification analysis, which is what we kind of call a but-for analysis. And what that means is development within this project would not occur but for the use of tax increment. And some of those common but-for factors would be the type and timing of development. So maybe you have a developer that wants to build, with just market 100,000 square foot or 50,000 square foot office with surface parking. They would say, but if you give us a little money for a parking structure, we can build 300,000 square feet of office, thus increasing the amount of taxes that are generated on that. Or maybe because of the market, development can't happen. You give them that money and now they could develop it here instead of 5 years down the road. There's a lot of extraordinary costs. So with the case of the one that you're looking at, there's that sewer lift station, which is a really high infrastructure cost that wouldn't happen in maybe another area. And so that would be a reason why you would create a project area. And then the last one would be the public benefit. So what are we going to get as a public entity by having this development in our city? And then this is kind of just the process map of what it would take if you decided to create a CRA. So the first thing you do is you create an agency, like I mentioned before, and that agency is organized to manage project areas. And then the process takes about 120 to 180 days. There's some mandatory public hearing notice periods and public hearings that you have to do when you create a project area to get public input. And then that time frame is really heavily dependent on negotiations with the other taxing entities. So talking with the county, talking with the school district, and negotiating to get a piece of that future tax increment growth. And then on the left side is kind of just a different processes. So you would adopt a resolution that shows the map of the area and why you're going to create it. And then you would create a plan and a budget. And then the last one would be those interlocal agreements with the different taxing entities. And then the other slides on here, we don't need to go over, but it just goes into detail on what each of those steps are. A lot of detail, I know, but any questions?
Is this something that you see occurring all over the state of Utah, within our county? Is it a common, because I know this is new to us, we've never been involved in this, and how has it worked, and does it seem to be an effective program?
Yep, so it's all throughout the state of Utah. So I would say here in Weber County, almost every city has a reinvestment agency. And then in Wasatch, the Wasatch Front, it's very popular. As you get more out into outside the Wasatch Front, it's a little less popular. But it has been around since the 80s. And I want to say there's been over 1,000 of these created. It's a very popular and a common tool that cities use to help spur development that would otherwise not come to a city.
And those 1,000 areas that you're referring to, where were they? Where are they located?
Yeah, so with in close proximity, so West Point, the Smith's Marketplace there that was created, that was a project area. I believe Syracuse has 6 or 7 project areas. Roy has 2 older RDAs. They just created a new CRA a few months ago that I helped them with. Ogden.
13.
Yeah, they have 32.
13.
13.
Yeah.
So they create them all the time.
I guess my point, so all of them are in the state of Utah, or are they in other states?
So this is a state of Utah tool, yeah. And it's anything from the big Adobe corporate headquarters in Lehigh was created through a project area, and then a small grocer in a smaller city could also be created through project area. So it's a tool that's used for all types of development.
I've got a question, Rob.
Yep.
So you set these up in there for a specific time, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
20 years, okay, so I know that part of that money goes back to the developer to repay him, right? So what if he is repaid in full in 15 years? Is he still going to collect that money? And where does that go?
Great question. So there's two types of agreements that are created. There's an interlocal agreement, and that's an agreement between the agencies and the taxing entities. And in that agreement, that specifies how long you're going to receive tax increment for, the percentage you're going to receive it for. It can even list what you're going to use that tax increment for. And then a lot of them have caps. So let's say you're showing, hey, we have a $4 million infrastructure is the reason why we're creating it. Those agreements will say, hey, you'll receive tax increment for 15 years at 50% or $4 million, whichever happens first. And then once you've gone through and negotiated all that with the taxing entity, so you know how much money you have, you would negotiate a separate participation agreement with the developer. And in there you would have whatever specifics you wanted to include in there. So you could, same thing, have a cap, say what they could use it for, limit the amount of years, and things like that. So in that agreement is where you basically tell a developer, this is what we're committing to, and this is what you have to commit to.
Are the agreements with each of the taxing entities different, or do they kind of demand they get the same amount?
So they're all different. So back to those acronyms, EDAs, URAs, and RDAs were created by a taxing entity committee, which was just one committee, and it was one agreement. With CDAs and now CRAs, you negotiate individually with each entity, and each interlocal agreement is a separate legal document. So you could have 10 years at 50% from the school district, since there's such a large amount of the tax, property tax, and then the sewer district could be 25 years at 75%. And a lot of the taxing entities, back, we call it the Wild Wild West days in the 90s. I was in elementary school, but they still exist, right? There are 32-year project areas, which doesn't happen anymore. And there was no negotiating. Like, taxing entities just had to participate, and it could be for really anything. Taxing entities now, a lot of them are getting a little more savvy with this tool, and so they're creating policies. So Weber School District has a policy, Fire District has a policy. I know that counties consider this a new policy, but I don't think they've adopted one yet. But it is getting more difficult to go through that negotiating process. And given the fact that you don't charge a property tax, it could be a little more difficult, but since you've never created one, I think the county does recognize that. And you would also be allowed as an agency to also participate with sales tax. So that could be something else that you could do if you decided to as a city council.
How often does that happen? They participate with sales tax?
It happens, so for cities that don't charge a property tax, a lot. And for other ones, it just depends on, back to that but-for analysis, and then what's the public benefit.
I would think it's a hard sales pitch to go to the school district and say, we want like amount of your property tax, but you're not getting any of ours because we don't pay.
Correct, and that's why you would do that, to show that you have some of that skin in the game, saying, hey, we're asking for your property tax, but we're going to also show you that we're going to also be a partner with this. Yeah, but there's even some that are created for housing projects. That's a little more rare. School districts tend to not be a fan of those, as they're like, hey, you're taking away our only source of revenue, but you're going to increase our costs. So you don't see this tool used a lot for residential projects. You would see it for a mixed-use project where there's a residential component, but just standalone residential would be pretty difficult to create, and you don't see it a lot.
I've got another question.
Yep.
So for this to work, and obviously this is brought up because the Smith thing is on the table, we would have to implement a property tax. Is that correct?
No, yeah. So you would negotiate with the other taxing entities to get a portion of their property tax, and then likely you would commit to give a portion of your future sales tax off of what that Smith would generate. And again, it wouldn't increase anyone else's property taxes. The property tax rate stays the same, or how it would go naturally. But yeah, you wouldn't have to charge property taxes as a city to incentivize things.
Yeah, say that out loud for so everybody hears, because that's.
Well, I'm just saying,
comment.
that realistically, when you're negotiating with these other taxing entities, if they look at the city and say, okay, you don't have any property tax, so you're not giving up anything, and you're wanting us to give up property tax, that doesn't work, I don't think. I think what you.
It can,
Yeah,
yes.
it might do, because they might see some advantages on their side as well.
It really
But what they're
depends.
probably gonna want is you to put something in, and that may be.
Yeah. A lot of it depends on that but for, right? And also what are the taxing entities currently receiving? So a great example in Riverton, I helped them create a project area. They don't charge a property tax rate either, but it was on Greenbelt property where the taxing entities were receiving about $60,000 a year in property tax. That includes all the taxing entities. And then by allowing this development, that couldn't happen but for the use of tax increment, even them getting 50% of their taxes, it went up to about $700,000 a year. So there are times where they would be willing to do it. Again, it's just that negotiating and showing them the public benefit for them, why is it needed, and what do they get out of it. And if you did run into that issue of them saying, well, hey, you don't charge a property tax, you could use the sales tax that Smiths would be generating as a way to help offset that issue that some might have. And not all could. Some taxing entities look at, well, how many project areas do you have in your city? And so given that Hooper doesn't have any, that could be another feather in your hat for why they would be willing to participate on this one, whereas maybe they wouldn't if Ogden can charge a property tax rate and they have 13. That would be a little more tougher of a pill to swallow.
And one of the other things that Weaver County School District, the fire district, look at is county participating with you. That's one of the first things they're going to ask is the county a participant with you? And that's something that my department can assist you with.
Any other questions? I think some, like you mentioned, some of the biggest concerns are always saying, well, we're paying more taxes. It's going to end up taxing. So I was glad, to hear you clarify that we're not going to go then to the other people that live in that area or any of us and say you're going to be paying now more tax.
Yeah, you're negotiating for taxes that don't exist. So, and if anything, it's going to result in less taxes because that's going to be the new growth that wouldn't happen but for creating that project.
Any other questions? Does anybody? Well, thank you. I think this is interesting. I mean, these are new programs. Like I say, we haven't been involved in them, and so it's new to get the information. Thank you, Rob. So now we'll turn the time again over to Stephanie.
Yeah, these are complicated. They're very nuanced, and each project area is very different from the next. Each city has a different economic need. So one of the things that we're able to do with these incentives is customize them for your needs and for your city. And that's something that you work with the county on if you wanted to go into this type of a process. And I'm going to skip through because I actually had a very similar presentation to Rob. That's why I had him go first. If we can skip through the tax increment and just go to the public infrastructure district piece. Perfect. So Rob gave you a really good description of tax increment finance, how CRAs are created, the history of those CRAs. That is one of Utah's development incentives as it relates to commercial development. The county does not use tax increment finance for residential development. We will consider doing that for a mixed-use development, something that has a commercial component on it, but we don't do it exclusively for residential because we partner very closely with the school district on these types of incentives. And the school district does not participate in housing residential tax increment finance incentives. So the state has tax increment finance, which is in the form of a community reinvestment agency, which, as Rob explained, you would have to form. But there's a second type of incentive in the development world in Utah, and that's called public infrastructure district. These are very new. Tax increment finance, as Rob stated, has been around for a very long time. Public infrastructure districts are very, very new. 2019 is when they were created by state statute. They're governed by Title 17D, Limited Purpose Local Government, Chapter 4 Public Infrastructure District Act. So these are state statute created, just as tax increment finance and CRAs are state statute governed. But this is another incentive that can work in tandem with a CRA, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. So keep that in the back of your mind, that these are two separate incentives created by two separate statutes, but they can work together in tandem as you're looking at doing commercial and large-scale development. So public infrastructure districts grant cities and counties the power to create basically a local district to deal with infrastructure needs. And it's a public finance mechanism. And the PIDs can issue debt. Before we go down the road of how that debt is issued, I want to state right up front, that debt is not carried by the city. It's carried by the developer. It does not affect your credit rating. It does not affect your bond rating. And you are not associated with it. The city creates the district and then walks away from it and lets the developer manage the debt. It is a finance mechanism for developers to take care of heavy infrastructure lifts that the city's not able to take care of, or that the developer isn't able to take care of with upfront bond financing. So once again, it gives the developer access to bond financing, tax-free bond financing, and let me state again, it is not city debt or county debt. The debt falls on to the developer, or the PID once it's created. Next slide. So PID uses are really valuable. They can incentivize commercial development. They can facilitate master plan communities. They can incentivize multifamily and low-income housing. As opposed to CRAs, PIDs can be used for exclusively residential projects. Enhanced or new infrastructure such as increased capacity, fixing the dilapidated infrastructure. If there's something that you guys have in your community, and we know that you have some sewer infrastructure lifts that need to happen, PIDs are one of the best mechanisms you can use to make that infrastructure happen by placing the debt burden onto the developer. Once again, they're used in tandem with tax increment financing, and when they're used in tandem with tax increment financing, it has to go towards infrastructure improvements. So as Rob had mentioned, there's several different uses you can use the CRAs and the tax increment finance for. Public infrastructure districts are limited as to what you can use those funds for, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So the PID powers the public infrastructure district once it's created. They can issue bonds to pay for the cost of improvements. They can enter into interlocal agreements with restrictions. They can acquire completed or partially completed improvements and assets. And they can contract with creating an entity for administrative services. Powers may be limited by the creating entity through a governing document. So you might be thinking, these are rogue. We don't want these. They're scary. They're rogue. They're not. As a creating entity, which would be your city council, you would be able to have a actual PID policy that your council would adopt, and that would set the parameters as what PIDs can do in your city limits. And then secondarily to that, every PID that you create has its own governing document. And in that governing document, that's where you put certain types of restrictions and limitations on what that PID can do. And it can go as far as, it can be just as simple as terms and conditions on how board members are appointed and how long the PID exists and how the caps the PID can do for bonding, or it can be very, very nuanced and go into things that you would include in a development agreement. So you have the power as the city council to govern that PID through a governing document. PIDs do have to file annual reporting, just like CRAs. And like I said, there's a lot of control that you can have over a PID. So PIDs are just another mechanism you can use to finance projects, specifically infrastructure. And the way that CRAs and PIDs work together is that you can leverage some of that tax increment, or all of the tax increment if you want, and put that into the PID to help pay off that bond. So you're probably wondering, how does the developer take out a bond and pay off that bond without using tax increment finance? And the answer to that is PIDs are created, and they're created so that the PID or the developer can leverage a mill rate onto their own property, not existing property, not any properties that are outside the boundary of the PID, just the properties that are in the project area. And that's generally their own properties. They can levy a mill rate onto that property to pay off that bond. So they get the financing up front. The city comes in and says, well, that's great, we'll create this for you, but we want you to do X, Y, and Z. And I'll give you an example of one of our PIDs in the county and what we did. And then the PID is created, and then they do an assessment on that property, add the extra millage rate onto it, and that millage rate is collected every year and goes towards paying off the bond. You can also use tax increment finance funding to pay off that bond as well. So there's two ways to pay that bond off for the developer, to incentivize that developer to come in to your city and put in needed infrastructure in addition to what their project needs. I know it's complicated.
Can they also assess fees to the homes that they're
To the homes that they're building in their properties, absolutely, yeah.
Because I've asked a couple developers about fees, and I've asked them if they are going to pay them back, and they said absolutely not.
That would be that additional millage rate that they put onto the property. So say you had a PID that was exclusively residential. Each parcel, and it's by parcel basis because it's based off of parcel property tax. Each parcel will have an additional millage rate attached to it. For commercial development, because the parcels are very large and it's usually one owner on the commercial property, they tend to work really, really well, and they're not complicated at all. When you get into just housing subdivisions, and PIDs are just housing subdivisions, they can be a little tricky because as the houses are sold, that mill rate goes with the new owner. And there are there are pieces of the code that require disclaimers for that. So the PID or the developer cannot just sell those houses and not inform the new residents that they're acquiring a PID bill.
Right. In that case, it seemed to me like we were helping them get loans, basically,
to finance their project. In a sense, that's what you're doing with the residential pieces. So what the cities and the counties that have done that with residential pieces is they mandate that the PID put in heavy infrastructure lifts. So I'll give you an example. This is more of a commercial example. Out in our West River corridor, we have a big industrial park that wanted to come in, and they wanted to do CRA financing as well as PID financing. In our West River corridor, we don't have a lot of utilities, so everything's just farmland. And so we, as the county, required them to do regional infrastructure lift. That means they were going to put their sewer line in. Instead of putting in a regular size, 12 or 14 inch sewer line, we made them put in a future regional sewer line, which is 30 inches. And the water company, we partnered with the water district out there. They had to build a $5 million water tank. So because they wanted to come in and they were first in, they had to put the public infrastructure in. So we allowed them to do a PID because inside that governing document and inside our county development agreements, we put a really heavy list. They had to donate 30 acres to the park district in addition to a $1 million improvement sum to the park district. So their improvements were probably, if they had just come in and developed out their parcel, it would have been about $50 million in infrastructure. Once the county came in and said, we'll do a PID for you and we'll do tax increment finance on top of that, but you're going to put this in. And our lift was $123 million once everything was put into the contract. So we have regional infrastructure being built, including a huge substation for electricity, water sewer connections, parks. So those are the types of things you can use PID financing for, is anything that's parks, trails, roads, water sewer. You can't actually use it for electricity, but they're using the tax increment finance for that piece. So that's how they're capital stacking that project, and that's what you need to think about as you're getting these developers in. What kind of public infrastructure needs do you have as a city that you can help the developer finance through these two different finance mechanisms? And the county's policy on tax increment finance and participation with the city on tax increment finance, we're about ready to adopt it, but we've been working through a brand new policy this year as well as processes. And our policy is we want to see our participation as a county coming in and supporting a public benefit, whether that be infrastructure or a significant contribution to the economic environment for a city. And we take both of those into consideration, but I will tell you, when a city comes to us and asks, and Rob can validate this, they recently did one with Roy City. When a city comes to the county and asks for their tax increment, the first thing we're going to ask them is, what public infrastructure are you going to be using? Are you going to be funding? And we want to see that the majority of the tax increment is going towards a public purpose. So that is one of the things that has changed in the county over the last couple of years. But for the most part, it's a benefit because the developers can't do their project they can't do their project without the assistance of the infrastructure lift. Any questions?
Do you know anything about the PID that Marion Slaterville just implemented for Grant? I call it Grant Road because it's where Dave Grant.
So it's not a PID, it's a CRA, yes. I am familiar with that. The county is participating in that.
I was told they're looking at doing a PID too for the multi-level house or income housing.
If they have this, so cities and counties, and unlike CRAs, cities and counties have to create their own PIDs separately. So if they are in the process of doing that, I'm not aware of that, but we did participate in the CRA recently in that area.
I just heard Bill Morris did that.
So we are and one of the services my office, my department offers is I work very closely with a lot of the cities in the county and their economic development teams and their city council and their mayors. I'm working very closely with Far West. They're looking at putting a PID in right now and a CRA. And one of the things that my office will do, we'll come and we'll handhold you through that process. We'll let you borrow our templates that we use in the county. If you're interested in learning more about how to actually create a CRA or create a public infrastructure district, my office is more than happy to come and do consultation. I work with a majority of the cities in Weber County in that capacity. So that's always something you can just give me a call and I'm happy to come in and do a work session with you.
What about cities that are similar to us out west here in the bottom of the county? Do they, like, for instance, maybe like Plain City or something like that? Do they have PIDs in their works? Did they do something like that when they put their grocery store and different things? Or
More likely CRAs or as Rob had said, the old style, the RDAs. So the county has 2 active PIDs and we've got 4 in our pipeline. PIDs are so new. We're one of a handful of counties that are actually doing this. Very few cities have some of the larger cities have started doing PIDs, but PIDs are so new and they're just not utilized yet. But to speak to what you're saying, yes, most of the cities in the county have CRAs or they have old RDAs that are either going to expire or they're looking to amend. We get that a lot. So the county has an economic development finance committee that I manage, and that committee meets monthly. And you're always welcome to bring a project to that committee and have us discuss that project with you, and we'll give you consultation on it, or we'll help walk you through the county process and or the CRA process. Or, like I said, I'm always happy to come and talk to the cities about PIDs. I do a lot of PID consulting for some of the other counties because it is such a new process, and Weber County is kind of known for doing it right. We've had our trials and error, and our bond counsel for Weber County are the gentlemen that actually wrote the PID legislation. So we're very fortunate to have a pretty intact policy that we share quite often with other cities and counties. particularly if you've got, like your situation, where you've got a huge infrastructure lift that, that would be better served to have the developer pick up that lift and not put any of the burden onto the city or the liability. That's the beauty of the PID, is that the city is completely not liable. So. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, a lot of good information to dive into. Okay, the next thing we have then is a discussion on clarification of HCC 114G. And I know Debbie and Bryce, you were the two that brought this to be on the city council, so do you have information you would like to present on this?
All right. We were just going through the Title I, 114-C, and it's stated that items may be added at the discretion of the mayor or two city council members. So this has been something that's been in place since, I guess, this was written or whatever. So we just thought that it would be good to 114G, it would be good to reemphasize that about the item should be submitted at least 3 business days prior to the date of the city council meeting, because in the 114C it just states that it should be a reasonable time, So we thought there should be a time limit. And then we also thought that we should put in that the agenda of the members of the city council may only be removed by those members, and something that's been put on by the agenda by the mayor could only be removed by the mayor, just to clarify that the things that are placed on the agenda would be staying on the agenda, and we would, there wouldn't be any issue. And just so that there would be a good working relationship.
I think that's the key thing, is we're a council, not just,
Yeah, because we're all the council.
individuals. We all need to work together. There's a lot of times when maybe Lisa has something that she wants put on, and I think, that should be her. I think, or Dell and myself, I think 2 council members justifies that it should be on what our code says that it can, so we just like that to remain in place.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what the code says, and so I just went back through a reference, and I only have since I've been there in January, so I can't go back to what the previous administration did. But I can go through, and every single month there was something that was added on by 2 city council members. And every time that was, and I agree, it is a matter of having good communication, because every single time, and my question always was, and because I brought this up in work meeting, is I just wanted to know that it was going to be put on there, because there was one time, and Reed and I had discussed this, there was the KSOS, the tower and the land. We had no idea what that even was. It just showed up on the agenda, and so as we would meet at work meetings, I would always say, yes, you're right, 2 city council members can put it on the agenda, but because I am the one conducting the meetings, and we need to have things in the packet, communication is the key. It just always needs to be that I at least know that something is going to be on the agenda. And if you go back through, and I can read these to you, but I don't necessarily need to, because there's a list from every single month, and I think the only time that it was not was the one time when it was brought up about the house, and then I spoke with Reed about that, and he even brought that up in the work meeting, that should have just been something discussed in the work meeting. It really wasn't anything, because if you go through and read what we talked about in our city council meetings, having someone ask a question, why isn't the contract done? What was the intent of that? Was it to say someone wasn't doing their job? And we talked about that in the work meeting. When Morgan received it, she gave it to me. When I received it, I passed it on to Reed. It was passed on to Brandon, and like we talked about today, it's just back in the hands of the person quite a bit why it was put on there to begin with for 2 city council members to be able to, because in the past there was administration that did not allow things to be put on the agenda, and they should be able to. But again, like you mentioned, the key is communication. Anytime you want anything on the city council meeting, never ever is there an objection. It is something that we should be discussing, and it has been. And there was one time, I was out in the parking lot and someone said, oh, we were told you wouldn't allow this to be on the agenda. No, that was never the case. No one would ever come and say, hey, this should be on the agenda. It would just be the agenda would come, and then I would find things on the agenda that, we could.
So privately, moving forward is just, past is the past, but if we put something on there, we need to make a notation of what it's about.
Yes.
Kind of like, Stephanie Russell or Rob Sand, I really had an idea, but I really didn't know for sure.
Should have
what that was
clarification.
about. So it'd have been nice to kind of know, maybe what they already discussed, but yeah, I think that's fair. We should get a description of what that's about.
Well, and if there's documentation or something that I'm conducting the meeting that I'm supposed to know about, I need to know what it is, because when it just comes on and says, well, there's lots of them here, but it would just say leasing of city property. Well, what city property were we specifically talking about? City property maintenance and management. These are things that have been on.
That's why we submitted the package like we did
Today, yes, and that was appreciated because then we knew. One thing we've talked about, and we don't always, but we really tried to get the agenda out 7 days, and I know we haven't, but that is our goal. And so as we talked with Morgan, our goal really is 7 days. And so if 2 council members want something, and everybody knows, so I can let Reed know, then 7.
We could change
Yeah,
this.
well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 7 days. I think the way that's written is fine. Legally, you only have to have 24 hours. But we try to have it.
That's
It just says reasonable.
Well, for example, if it's
Yeah,
an ordinance
reasonable
change,
is
I need to know something so I can get things.
Yeah.
Reasonable was so handy.
And I agree, there's some things on this agenda that I had no idea what they were. In fact, most of the things on the agenda, I didn't know. So a little more explanation on the agenda items, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So I don't know. I know you changed the wording that the city council shall establish requirements, but I don't know if you had certain requirements, because again, if we do this, we'll have to have a public hearing because we're changing. So we need to come up with something. And like I say, I think communication, I don't see that there has been a problem other than that one time when I know that people were upset because but that was a communication even if being put on, because we didn't know. All I had to be was someone calling saying, what's going on, rather than it being something that we discussed with city council. But do you have suggestions for that? Have you came up with establishing requirements that you wanted? What are those requirements?
Well, the one, there were a couple things I had, and but there were a couple things, like it should have, it shouldn't be something that's been repeated. It should be something that's in the now. So that we're not repeating something over and over again, or that anybody is.
Yeah.
This is for everybody that submits something.
Sure.
So, something that someone hasn't wrote out or something, and they're just being repetitive with it. That is written, things like that. Just normal things that expect from some paperwork to do.
I think that's a good discussion.
Yeah.
Well, and that's
And if it goes forward, you feel like you need to actually change this ordinance, then let me know and I'll prepare an ordinance change. But-
Yeah, 'cause
But I need a little warning more than a day.
Oh, yes. Well, that's definitely what, this was what we felt should maybe be in there just to define things a little bit better.
I think that's good.
Well, and we have our board meeting too, because there is always a lot of things to discuss, and because of the Open Meetings Act, we really can't have outside meetings. So I think that's important, and I feel like at our work meetings, we do have an opportunity to be able to discuss a lot of things, and so
anyways,
okay, this is,
if we need further discussion, we
Okay.
can finish it up at work meeting. But it's just something that we felt we needed to bring.
okay. So is there anything else, Caesar, do you want to say with that? Okay. Okay, well, let's move on then. So the next one then is, we don't have any public hearings tonight, is an action item. And so it is on an ordinance amending Hooper City's fencing ordinance and establishing effective date. And there are, I have a few questions on this, and maybe some of you do as well. And maybe I could just give a little bit of background, maybe why we decided this needed to be. So in the past, someone could come in and after the fact, when a subdivision was already started and even the developer's agreement was already signed, then they would come back and say, well, we don't necessarily want to put this separation fence in. And there could be a property line. We have one example, it was like an east side property, and there were 6 different homes. Well, 3 of them said, well, we want to have a fence, and 3 of them said they didn't. Well, because of that, then the fence is on the property line in a couple of homes, and then it's like 20 feet off the property line, then it's 60 feet off the property line, and that it does not make for a very congruent subdivision. Or now we have some of these homeowners now that would like their fence moved back along their property line. And so when we were going through this, one thing, and it's one thing if it is the same, and it says that the same owner owns the land, because we talked about this, like if a grandpa, for instance, gave his granddaughter an acre to build on, well, maybe he's using that back half, and maybe he doesn't necessarily want to have a fence. There's one property owner then because he did that. That's a little bit different than the case when it's someone else, and one thing that needs to be signed, we felt like before the subdivision was ever approved, not after. And I don't know, my thinking is I feel like we should, if our ordinance is going to be that we need to have a land separation fence, that we should have it. It shouldn't be up to each independent person along there. So we have a fence that's not even straight along the back of the property.
I think there should be a land separation fence, except where the person owns the land around it. So I don't see any reason.
So you're in favor of this new language? Is that what?
Well, I'm not in favor of the new language where it says that the city council may waive the land use separation in the following conditions. Because that's when you can have adjacent property owners provide the city a signed request to waive it. So like I say, in that one subdivision, there were 6. 3 of them signed a waiver saying, well, we don't care if it's there. 3 of them said they wanted it there. And so now in this particular subdivision, you have 2 separate fences. You have a fence on the property line, then you have the 20-foot in with it. So I think if we have an ordinance, a land separation fence.
The only time I know of that seemed like it wouldn't matter was I know of an instance when a family, and a grandma and grandpa didn't want the land separation between the 2 of them, so the kids could go back and forth, which I don't see a problem with,
I agree
for something like that.
I think if we
well, I don't necessarily want to have a land use separation fence. And the other idea is that then that person ends up selling, and now there isn't a land separation fence. Would we have some kind of provision they would have to do it at that time?
I think I'm getting a little confused with this fencing because it's a land use separation. So if you're putting in two homes, there's not the same land use, so it wouldn't be required. So I'm not.
So if there's a 10-acre parcel,
Well, in
and
the
then
example you just gave us, though.
and then two people built, is that correct? That could be the minor subdivision, and it could be the land use between those two homes and the farm ground, and one of them wanted it, and the other one
You
didn't.
could waive the separation fence between the two landowners, but not
Yes.
between the rest.
Yes, that's my point. You could waive it in between the two landowners, but not between
And you
the
wouldn't even need to
landowners.
waive it there because it's the same land.
Yeah.
So it is at council discretion, so you've always got that provision. I think the challenge in my mind on letting people agree to avoid the fence is that the people that agree now are not the ones that are going to own it in a few years. And if the subdivider agreeing, the subdivider's not going to own it for more than a few months because they're going to sell it to somebody else. So the idea of the separation fence was the protection of both the farm part that's being separated out, but also the protection of the people who don't want the kids dealing with horses wandering into their yard. So really, it's not the subdivider that would have to agree, it would be the old landowner, and that's not going to even be determined until well after the subdivider's out. So I think that idea of the subdivider going out and twisting the arm of his neighbors to waive the fence is not a good idea. I guess that's
So you're referring to like Orange Meadows, right? Is that the,
Well,
is that the area? Okay.
that's just a whole.
Yeah.
They just did it wrong.
Situation.
They didn't build it on the property line.
Well,
It
it's
was
required
required that they do
property
it.
line.
The rest of this language that the planning commission's come up with is pretty good. But I think a little bit of a rewrite in those exceptions would be helpful. So I'd suggest maybe not passing it. And if you want me to, I'll go back. I think Brandon wrote this one.
And if everything, I think we should have some language that has to be done ahead, like the initial process, not after the fact. Because that's also what happened after the fact. You know, the subdivision was already approved, and then they came back and said, oh, well, they told us we have a text that says they really don't need to have a fence. Well, no, that needs to be done in the initial process, not after the fact.
It says before the building.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that there's clarification because when I was building, you bring your plans to the planning commission and things, they were going to actually, if you know where I live, they wanted me, because I was subdividing the land, to put up a 6-foot non-climbable fence around the spot where I was. Well, that didn't even work with where I was. And so, of course, there was talking back and forth, and finally, there was an agreement that I didn't have to do that because of where I am and what I was doing. So I'm glad to see there's some progress, and because it makes it really hard to know what you can and can't do if it's not really clear with them.
Well, I think that would be good then, Reed, if you want to go back.
We'll try to.
Yes, and then we can have this brought back then on our next city council meeting if everybody's agreeable with that.
Well, I guess we need a motion to table this since it's an action item to.
Oh, no. Yes, let's have a motion to table this. Is there someone that would want to make the motion to table this?
I'll make the motion to table. Let's see, what's the last thing? Okay, I'll make a motion that we table ordinance number 0-2024-06 until the rewrite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have it by next meeting.
Okay. Motion was made by Councilmember Northrup. Is there a second? Second is made by Councilmember Wilcox. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so the other one then is this resolution. So we've already approved to do the interlocal agreement with Hooper City and West Haven City, but we last time realized we had to have a resolution.
Yeah, that was probably my mistake. When you approve an agreement with another entity, another governmental entity, that needs to be done by resolution. And we didn't have a resolution. We approved it, didn't have a resolution. So this is just a resolution, putting in writing what you did last time.
Any questions on that? Okay, is there someone then that would like to make that motion to approve that?
I'll motion that we approve the resolution number 2024-07, approving an interlocal agreement between the city, West Haven City regarding the improvements on 5100 West between 40,000 South and 33,000 South.
The motion was made by Councilmember Wilcox. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second made by Councilmember Northrup. This needs to be, any discussion on that before we go to the roll call vote? Okay, so Councilmember Fowers?
Aye.
Councilmember Maragoni? Aye. Councilmember Northrup? Aye. Councilmember Wilcox?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you. So now we're to the part of public comments. Does anyone have, okay?
Sorry, can you take me to the world?
Patrick Rico, 3501 South, 5100 West. First thing I wanted to ask about is the interlocal agreement for the 5100 West project. Last I left, I was under the impression that Councilman Fowers, you were going to work with West Haven, I believe, to come to some understanding of what that was. I assume you were satisfied that what was in the agreement reflected what your original intent was?
Right.
Okay. And it turned out to be a good agreement then?
I think you can be comfortable with the agreement. I mean, we have, there'll be part of the road. I mean, where the question was, the Hooper City originally felt like the west side of that improvement would be done with the developer, and the east side, of course, would be West Haven. And given that UDOT still is planning to come through there, honestly, I'm not sure that this local agreement, I think it's good the way it is.
Okay.
But there's a kind of a timetable involved with that. I don't think how soon UDOT will move on that, but the thing is, the school, maybe the school going in, north of that has made a difference also.
Understood.
That new walkway, the Hookers.
I see it underway.
Right, that they kind of started on as part of that agreement. So.
Good. And then I had one question about the order of things, I guess, the order of operations here. It would seem to me that on the Hooper side, the 5100, that widening the street kind of ends up in some of my neighbors' front door. What are we doing there? Was that part of the discussion? How are we dealing with the fact that a couple of these people, seriously, their front doors would almost open onto the street when you widen that road? Is that part of the interlocal agreement? Is there some sort of design criteria that says we're going to move it for them?
It won't be moved, but what will happen is that there'll be a variance for the setback agreement. I mean, it's not, this was, it'll be grandfathered in other words. So it's not like.
So there's no relief for them necessarily.
As far as how it's going to look.
There's a legal relief.
There's legal.
Well, that's, yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. But that's not what my concern
The problem
is.
is they built too close to the public right of way, and you can't solve that.
Those houses were built when that was a dirt road. So I can't.
It was still a public right of way.
Okay. Well, I'm concerned what happens to people when we do these things. Because think about it this way. If the state were to come through, what would they do? Is this a state road? And are they okay with this?
5100 is not a state road.
That's not what we were told before.
So I guess my question is are we doing right by them? That's really it.
I can give you an example of 5500 West, that they're widening down here. And and we addressed this at our last meeting, because sometimes it is the telephone poles and people really don't own beyond that. I mean, sometimes we plant grass and flower beds and everything else. But if there is property that actually they need to secure in order to do that, they are compensated. So those people down there on 5500 West, and most of them were the ones that were north of 4000, if it ended up being a position that they had to acquire more land. One of them, for example, was on the corner to do the handicap ramp and to make sure it fit. And they had to take out some trees. They are compensated for that. So.
And that's fair enough. I just think in circumstances like this, those houses have been there for a really long time. And I wonder if there's not something we can do there to negotiate the design of that road or something. That's all.
Thank you. Is there any other comments?
Stacy Grieco, 3501 South, 5100 West. First of all, are you guys sure that 5100, where we are at, is not a state road? Because I believe it was Mayor Bailey when we came before the city a long time ago and asked some questions about getting the speed limit lowered on that road because they go so fast. We were told back then that it is a highway and that's a state road.
It's a state route.
Or a state, yeah. I'm just making sure everybody knows.
Sorry.
So that the state doesn't come in and say, sorry, you know?
If it was a state road, the UDOT would be plowing it in the winter.
Okay.
And it is not, it's superseding West Haven. The state roads that are owned in Herbert are 4,055 and 59.
Okay.
And they will have another number too, if you go on and look, like 193,
Okay.
if they're state.
That's fine, I just wanted to make sure. And then I just wanted to clarify, there was a big conversation about putting things on the agenda and having 2 council members. And I believe you referred to a conversation you had with me in the parking lot about it being put on. And and then your son actually tapped on my shoulder and said, that's you. And I said, yeah, you were the one who told me I couldn't put it on. And he said, you're lying. So I just wanted to read an email that I sent to you and your response. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I don't like to be called a liar.
And I don't think I called you a liar.
No, you didn't. He did. Just a minute ago in this meeting, as I was sitting there. So I said, Mayor Bingham, how does a concerned citizen get something on the agenda for Thursday's city council meeting? And if somebody could check, I'm not sure what day May 13th was. Monday, May 13th. So city council meeting is Thursday. You responded, sorry. I hate phones. You said the agendas are set the week before. There are 2 times in a meeting for the citizens' comments. You're welcome to state your concerns in either of those times. Is there something I can help you with? So you didn't come right out and say, no, I can't put on the agenda, but you did lead that to believe it's a week in advance. I then emailed everybody else on the city council and got different answers that 2 city council members would put it on. I just, for the record, want to clarify that since it was brought up and then I was called a liar by your son just a minute ago.
I can't address that because I'm sitting up here, but I think we're talking about 2 different things. When you asked me about getting things on the city council, and that's what we were talking about tonight, 2 city council members can, if they come and want something. As far as having just a resident, and is that what you were asking at the time?
I was asking how I got something on the agenda.
Okay, yes.
You had said
Yes.
the agendas are done a week in advance, leading me to believe that you couldn't do it unless it was a week in advance. When I sent the same email to the other council members, they had said, what is it? If 2 city council members agree that something can be put on, then we can get it put on.
Yes.
So there was a difference of opinion or answers there, and then I just wanted to make sure, like I said, I don't like to be called a liar, especially when I have the email that says.
I can't address that. And months. We don't always.
No.
State regulation is 24 hours, but in order to have everyone have time to go through the packets. And it was, what you wanted on was the temporary hold on conditional use permits for human services and facilities. And that was put on the agenda June 6th. And after we talked in the parking lot that day, I said, oh, sure, that can be put on. No one had ever addressed for that to be put on. So
No, I had just asked a generalist question.
Yeah, yours was a general, but sure, if anybody has something, then certainly. And that's why I said, and that's one thing we changed. It used to be that you could only have public comments on things that weren't on the agenda. And I changed it so both times you can have any, because I thought sometimes that's after the fact.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure because you gave me a different answer than everybody else gave me. And then when I just brought that up, like I said.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make
just a general.
that clarified.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Any other public comments?
I have a public comment, so probably could have done it in a work meeting at a time. So, on the Smiths, I know next week there's a big presentation on the Smiths with the planning commission. I just want to make sure that the city council pushes for a fiscal analysis study for that, and that we actually choose the firm that's going to do that. And from my understanding, from my research, it's the developer would pay for it. I think that's an important thing that we need to do as a city to actually know. I think it's all fun and get excited for, hey, there's this big, we're going to make all this revenue. Are we really? We need to look at the beginning and we need to look at the end. And I think this will help shed some light on that. So my public comment is as a city council, we need to choose someone to do that or make that a very important component in the decision process. I think we owe it to our citizens, and which is the most important part of our city. So.
And I know they have completed one. I don't know if that's a company that you would be agreeable with, but they're about $18,000.
Yeah, that's not out of our budget. That's not my concern at all.
Yeah, we don't want to have to pay for that.
It's going to be the developer. So anyway, that's my recommendation.
Yes, and hopefully people will come. So next on the 22nd at 7 o'clock is going to be a planning commission meeting. It is a public hearing, and so people are welcome to come and do comments. The notices have been sent out to everyone who is within 600 feet, like we do with any other. Terra Strata LLC, who is the name of the company that is wanting to do this commercial development, will be here for the presentation. So, well, what it is, it's a conditional use and rezone. So,
Did you make the comment that a comprehensive fiscal impact analysis person has already been selected to do that?
no, I'm saying the developer has already sent a fiscal, and so has Stephanie. And she mentioned that in a meeting, and then I know Amanda said, well, we want a different one than what was done. And then the time Stephanie said they're about $18,000.
Well, so Bryce, I think that's what you're saying, is that the city council would like to select that.
Yes.
And the cost would go to the developer.
Absolutely. And with recommendations from the planning commission as well, I think we all ought to be involved in that process. Selecting someone that's bipartisan, that has no ties to anybody, that can look at it objectively and give us true numbers, not numbers that are going to, sway one way or the other, for or against. I just want to know what reality is going to be.
So that brings up something that we also didn't have time in our work meeting, that I had this Placer group, and they sent me this proposal, and that's exactly what it is. But this also, and I can tell you the price of what it was. But they go through and do the marketing, and I can send this to you, but I was just going to tell you this. They had submitted this. They are ones that would be interested in doing it. They have their data. Let me see the pricing, and I believe it was $18,000. I mean, like here, they have the price on it. So definitely there are couples, and that certainly we can talk to Terra Strata and see if that's something that they normally do. And I can't find that picture. But I believe it was. I don't know. I believe it was 18,000. Anyways, I hope people come. Did you have another public comment, sir? If you wouldn't mind coming up. If not, because it's live, they can't hear you.
Okay.
We found that out last
The
time.
only thing, need to state my name. It's Patrick Rigo, 3501 South, 5100 West. I just want to attach my name to the things that Bryce brought up. I ran out of time earlier, but I think that's a critical component as we kind of delve into this. And the presentations I saw today were tremendous. A lot of really good information, but it made it even more critical to me that we get an economic analysis here. Because all of the smaller city folks that I've talked to who have experienced some of the development around here, west of I-15, the common theme is that they've not seen any relief in taxes and certainly traded some quality of life for the developments that occur. And so that's one of the things that I would like to see. I would like to see the economic analysis. And then how does that long-term benefit the Hooper resident in terms of their tax load? Because what everybody I talk to has told me is what they've seen is growth in government and that most of that money gets absorbed. Now maybe these new programs prevent that from happening, but I would like to see an independent economic analysis.
Okay, thank you. And like I said, next time's a public hearing. And I did find that page. The first year is 17,000, year 2 is 19,000. That was on this